Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3741, Something Arthur Shouldn't Eat. Rocher was still in a daze, even as he left the mysterious yellow tower. Reaching the top was no easy task. As the owner of the tower, shouldn't he congratulate me or assign me some tasks? He could have at least revealed the truth of the mysterious yellow tower, or the significance of the ruined graveyard. He didn't even reward me somehow. Instead, he just asked me to deliver a message to Holy Mike. Why? Rocher pondered in silent misery. By the time he had come to his senses, he found himself under the big bell. Everyone in the Divine Bell City watched him expectantly. Rocher had never disappointed them before. He was outstanding in all he did in the Divine Bell City. This time, he'd reached the top. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him. Rocher, did you succeed? Bromley, who was standing nearby, asked with concern. Rocher glanced at his inner world briefly then nodded. The sword is already in my inner world. Splash. Although they had expected this, the crowd still burst into an uproar. Finally, Rocher has reached the top. Rocher, did you try climbing outside of the tower to see what it's like? Quote. Everyone bombarded him with questions, barely giving him room to respond. Bromley waved his hand, and everyone immediately shut up. Go to cultivate in seclusion and bear the sword. Only after the other shore token was carried in one's inner world and a real link was established could one truly own it. Rocher nodded and stood up, eyeing Mike in the group. Even though Mike was a holy being in the Divine Land, he still had to line up to ring the bell in the Divine Bell City. Holy Mike, Rocher greeted, bowing courteously. Mike bowed back politely. What's the matter? Are you going to challenge the 9th floor of the mysterious yellow tower this time? Rocher asked warily. Mike nodded. Yes, I want to reach the 9th floor. Rocher was a creature born in Mike's inner world, and later on, he was reborn. In a short period of time, he had become a consummate true god, and after entering the ruined graveyard, he had even reached the 33rd floor of the mysterious yellow tower. On the other hand, Mike was still at the 8th floor, which was equivalent to the 8th stage of the other shore realm. As a holy being of the Divine Land, he was lagging behind. Of course, Mike wasn't an isolated case. The other holy beings, except Bromley, were in even worse situations. Moreover, Rocher was only able to reach the 33rd floor thanks to the help of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord and Dale. However, Rocher wasn't aware of this, no one was. Everyone was just under the impression that Rocher was extremely talented. When I reached the 33rd floor, an old man appeared, Rocher said seriously. Beside them, Bromley, Holy J, and many other humans exchanged strange glances. Mike's eyes flashed. Is he the owner of the mysterious yellow tower? Mike had learned more about the other shore from his wife, Lorena. He knew that even in the source world, it was not easy to become a powerful warrior at the other shore realm. Among all the members of the 9 Li race, only Chiyu had been to stage 33 on the other shore. In everyone's eyes, the mysterious yellow tower was like a completely independent other shore. They could only imagine how powerful its owner must be. He said he was, Rocher answered with a nod. The expressions of Mike, Bromley, Holy J and the others changed slightly. What did that old man say? Bromley asked. Bromley was now a member of top management of the ruined graveyard, but he knew very little about it. In fact, even the natives of the ruined graveyard didn't know much about it. He asked Holy Mike to go to the 8th floor of the mysterious yellow tower and bear a butterfly like other shore token, Rocher replied gravely. Hearing this answer, Bromley, Mike and Holy J all scratched their heads in confusion. The 8th floor of the mysterious yellow tower. Mike frowned. I remember that among the 400 other shore tokens on the 8th floor of the mysterious yellow tower, none of them looks like a butterfly. The old man just put it there, Rocher replied. Mike's eyes lit up. Since it was put there by the owner of the mysterious yellow tower, it must be extraordinary. The other shore realm warriors who had been waiting in line in the Divine Bell City stepped to the side, clearing a path for Mike. He rang the bell firmly, then went into the mysterious yellow tower and quickly found the butterfly. After bringing the butterfly back to the Divine Bell City, Mike could barely contain his excitement. He couldn't wait to bear it. This was a new other shore token. However, when he tried activating the butterfly's ability after he bore it, he found that the butterfly was pitifully weak. It only had about 10 divine megatons of force, and it had no other special ability. What's the use of this other shore token? Mike said sulkily. The butterfly floated alone in the air above Mike's evolutionary universe. It was very nimble, but unfortunately, it was indeed quite weak. Holy J, Bromley and Rocher looked at each other in dismay. The butterfly was so much weaker than the other shore tokens on the 8th floor of the mysterious yellow tower. It's strange. Why must Mike bear this other shore token? Holy J pondered aloud, stroking his beard. Since the owner of the mysterious yellow tower specifically requested it, you have no choice but to bear it now, Bromley said. He probably has a bigger plan set in motion. Mike nodded, deciding to shrug off his disappointment for now. Even if he bore this other shore token, it wouldn't hinder his cultivation. He could change it when he reached a higher floor in the future. After a period of time of acceleration, the Pear Hill's speed was now hundreds of times faster than before. Whenever this giant mountain passed through the chaotic clouds, the clouds rippled outward. The first destination of the Pear Hill was Zen's primitive land. Second would be the ruin graveyard. With the help of the first butterfly, Zen could sense the location of his primitive land. The second butterfly was brought into the Jade Pure Realm by Dale. Its location had always been very strange, so he could only feel it vaguely. The moment Mike brought the butterfly back to the Divine Bell City, a clear location showed up in Zen's mind. Zen, who was still cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes and looked alert. The west, he muttered. In the bubble, when he saw that Mike took the butterfly, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord heaved a sigh of relief. The lone sword was the most powerful inheritance in the mysterious yellow tower. That butterfly would lead Zen straight to the ruin graveyard. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord nodded in satisfaction. He had done what he could. I wonder how the war between the Snake Spirit Sect and the Bird Spirit Sect is going, said Dale. Because the bubble's location had been exposed before, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord didn't allow them to observe the war in secret anymore. After all, if they were not careful enough, they could be caught by the Snake Spirit King. Since the Bird Spirit King hasn't awakened, he definitely is no match for the Snake Spirit King, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord concluded without thinking about it too much. I just hope that the Bird Spirit Sect can hold on. Arthur said. Rumble. Just then, Arthur's huge stomach grumbled loudly. Did you eat something strange? Dale asked curiously, eyebrows raised. You're kidding. I can eat anything, Arthur said with a shrug. All of a sudden, the expression on Arthur's face changed dramatically. His eyes rolled to the back of his head, and only the whites could be seen. But not long ago, he ate something that he shouldn't have eaten, Arthur said in a strange voice. Do you remember that metal-devouring beast? Ha ha ha. Chapter 3742, Invasion. Arthur laughed manically. He was exuding a completely different aura. It was the aura of a treacherous being. Dale, Derek, and Justin grew pale. Who are you? Get out of Arthur's body. How'd a treacherous being get in him? They took all precautions when exploring the Jade Pure Realm, knowing full well how dangerous treacherous beings could be. They knew Arthur was in a dire situation. Amid this commotion, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord assessed the situation calmly. He had been feeling uneasy the past few days, sensing something amiss. Now he knew why. The treacherous being in Arthur's body had mentioned the metal-devouring beast that Arthur had swallowed. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord deduced that coordinates had probably been planted in that creature. Arthur could devour everything but he couldn't destroy the coordinates. They had stayed in his stomach. Whoosh, whoosh, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord strode forward and slapped Arthur's forehead with his hands. Arthur's mouth flew wide open. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord then activated a pill-sized holy stone emitting the light of annihilation, popping it directly into Arthur's open mouth before quickly snapping it shut. Ouch! A pained expression crossed Arthur's face. He flailed around wildly, apparently struggling against something the others couldn't see. The powerful light of annihilation was exploding within his body, causing him agony. The resentment level and the hatred level treacherous beings could tolerate the light of annihilation to some extent, but they were very sensitive to it. Purr. Unable to bear it any longer, white treacherous beings soon emerged from Arthur's ears. They began to return to their original forms. They were two snake masters of the Snake Spirit Sect. One of them was Abel, ranked 16th among the Snake Masters. The other one was Holcomb, who ranked 17th. They could be considered part of the backbone of their group. Ha, Abel laughed gleefully. We finally found the rats hiding underground. HMPH. They are too weak. They're not even worth fighting. Otherwise, our king would have already eliminated them, Holcomb said with disdain. The snake spirit sect had already sensed the existence of the bubble, but it had been elusive. The snake spirit sect had tried to locate and capture it several times, but had always failed until now. Sharp spiked scales began to appear on the surface of Dale's body, adding to his bulk. Are you here for us? What an honor, he sneered. With a flick of his hand, Justin took out a huge writing brush from his Sumeru space. You've gone through so much trouble to get here. You deserve to rest in peace here, as well. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord and his disciples had been in the Jade Pure Realm for a long time now. They knew how to deal with treacherous beings. There was currently only one thought in their minds. They needed to subdue the two snake masters so the bubble's location could never be exposed. Buzz. Justin swung the huge writing brush. The blue power of space flowed from its tip. Abel and Holcomb reacted quickly, writhing away. Crescent-shaped patterns appeared on the surface of Abel's body. Get ready. Abel's body flashed with a bright light that engulfed Holcomb. They became extremely fast, darting around the bubble. They looked like flowing bands of light, leaving long and thin shadows. Take this. It's show time. Abel and Holcomb then deployed their thurgies. Single-colored thorns materialized from Abel's body and shot toward the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. Holcomb released sinister icicles which shot out in all directions. The small bubble was filled with freezing cold air. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord and his 4 disciples were all at the Eternal Realm, but they were much stronger than most. Moreover, Elder Shui had also taught the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord the blood-controlling method. In terms of pure bloodline power, the 5 were equal to each other in strength. You're dead meat. Arthur smiled widely. Circles of threads appeared on the surface of his shiny belly. As they spun out, they formed vortexes in the surrounding space. The single-colored thorns and icicles fell into them and were quickly sucked into Arthur's stomach. Dale's body continued transforming. In addition to the spiked scales, his head began to shrink, and his hands turned into claws. He got on all fours and darted forward, giving chase to the 2 snake masters like a moving shadow. The power of the thorns and icicles was extraordinary. They would have caused serious injuries on ordinary Eternal Realm fighters. But Dale dashed through at high speed, easily dodging them. The snake masters, however, were just as fast, darting here and there as Dale chased after them. An ordinary observer would have seen what looked like 3 bands of light, 1 black and 2 white, shooting about in the bubble. The chase went on for a few moments. Dale, take a break. Let me handle this. As Justin spoke, he swung his writing brush again. The writing brush began drawing in the air, as if controlled by a graceful artist. It outlined the figures of the 2 snake masters. Buzz. 2 blue lights flashed, and Abel and Holcomb were suddenly pulled directly in front of Justin. Derek, who was beside Justin, had been ready. He held 2 runes tightly in his hands. The runes were inlaid with holy stones. As soon as Abel and Holcomb appeared in front of them, Derek wasted no time slapping the runes on them. Clap, clap. The runes immediately released the light of annihilation on the 2 snake masters' bodies. Their bodies began to tremble violently, as if they were being electrocuted. Abel and Holcomb struggled to get the runes off, but they were specially made to deal with treacherous beings. It wouldn't be that easy. No matter how hard they struggled, the runes were attached firmly to them. However, they were hatred-level treacherous beings. The ordinary light of annihilation could suppress them, but it could not cause them substantial damage. Justin drew a few strokes on their bodies with the writing brush. The blue power of space turned into a rope, tying them up tightly. Arthur, quickly, find the coordinates in your belly, Derek said. Destroying the coordinates would kill the 2 snake masters once and for all. Chapter 3743, The Irreversible Downgrade. Placing their coordinates in the body of the metal-devouring beast was a big risk for the snake masters. These coordinates were, after all, their lifelines. But Arthur wasn't careful to check himself after swallowing the metal-devouring beast, which gave the 2 snake masters a chance. At Derek's warning, Arthur began to look inside his belly, holding it with both hands, trying to look for the 2 sets of coordinates within his body. Master, how's it going on the outside? Dale asked the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had been lost in thought, but Dale's question shook him out of his reverie. It's coming, he said seriously. What is coming? Asked Dale. The biggest trouble, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord replied. The fact that the two snake masters had appeared in the bubble was causing them the most trouble. Their appearance meant that the bubble's location had already been exposed to the snake spirit sect. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, trying to control the bubble and move it underground, had sensed that something was wrong. The biggest trouble, Dale said, the corners of his eyes twitching. This cat-and-mouse game had gone on in the Jade Pure realm for many years and had now finally come to an end. Meanwhile, Arthur was still searching for the coordinates in his stomach, a space so large that it had formed a world of its own. It was difficult for any creature to get out of his stomach alive, the only exceptions being the treacherous beings. But before he could find the coordinates, he heard a muffled sound from above his head. The bubble had cracked open. Sewell and more than 10 snake masters were making their way in through the crack. Dale, Derek, Arthur, and Justin had pumped up, brimming with fighting spirit. They had been of the opinion that as long as they properly handled everything, they could still survive in the bubble. But their hearts sank at the sight of the snake masters. "Go inside," the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord shouted at them. The mysterious yellow tower was emitting a strong gravitational force, sucking the 4 disciples into it. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had his hands pressed together and continually changed his movements. A faint yellow light appeared on the surface of the mysterious yellow tower, causing it to look like an endless amount of power was accumulating on it. Sewell coiled in the air, looking down upon the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord below him. His lips were curled in a mocking sneer as he said, "Don't even try to fight back. It won't be of any use." The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord smiled as he said calmly, "I don't think so. Letting you go caused me some small troubles. But what's the point of reviving the Monkey Spirit King? The real end is not in this other shore," Sewell said. The Element Spirit Civilization reported everything important to Sewell, who then sifted through it and reported the most important information of the lot to the Snake Spirit King. Sewell knew way more than the Snake Spirit King did. He could guess that these people were probably the reason why the humans had been able to make rapid progress and even awaken the Monkey Spirit King. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord laughed, every wrinkle on his face trembling. "Do you think you know the real end? Even Cornelius doesn't. He is stupid." Sewell sneered and said, "You've been underground for far too long. It looks like you're so scared that you've begun to talk nonsense." According to the Snake Masters, Cornelius was a wise king. Right from the internal strife in the 4 Spirits sect to the trap into the present, he had meticulously planned every step. How could he be called stupid? "Cornelius, I know you're looking at us," the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord said suddenly. Sewell's eyes glinted coldly before sharp spines came shooting out of his body in quick succession. He didn't want this old human man to talk nonsense and offend the Snake Spirit King. How dare he call him by his name? Sewell was about to pounce on the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord when a voice sounded in his mind. Let him continue. But this old man, calm down, I don't care. A truly powerful figure wouldn't care about the words of the weak. The Snake Spirit King used the limited omnipotent stone to explore everything in the bubble. And now, he wanted to hear what the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord wanted to say. Sewell said to the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, "My king allows you to continue." The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord sneered and said, "The 4 Spirits sect has been deceived. You have all been deceived." "What do you mean?" Sewell asked, as instructed by the Snake Spirit King. "The downgrading," said the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. Sewell's countenance became serious. He thought that the rats hiding underground had been able to survive for so many years only because they had accidentally obtained the bubble to protect them. What more could they know? "Go on," Sewell continued, his eyes narrowing. "The downgrading is irreversible," said the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. The other Snake Masters remained stoic because they didn't know what the downgrading meant. Sewell, on the other hand, was shaking. Cornelius had once told him the meaning of downgrading. The chaos and the other secondary worlds were extension of the main world. The Snake Spirit sect had been able to defeat the other 3 sects of the 4 Spirits sect because they had planned everything in advance in the chaos, obtained an advantage in the downgraded world, and as a result, won the battle. Now, the Snake Spirit King's next step was to upgrade. All the members of the Snake Spirit sect would return to the main world, where the Snake Spirit sect would rule. "You are just a creature from the secondary world. You can't even take a single step in the main world, but you dare talk a lot of nonsense. Do you think I believe you?" Sewell sneered again. "This fraud began when you planted the first holy stone and the first holy pillar began to grow. Did any of the secondary worlds you mentioned collapse? Were any of them restored to the main world? Even if the secondary worlds were destroyed completely, they would still exist. Am I right?" the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord continued. He had never been to the main world, but had a clear understanding of everything through Elder Shui's dream. Sewell hesitated yet again, and this time, so did the Snake Spirit King. Back then, the Four Spirits sect had built many secondary worlds, a number of which had collapsed. These worlds had been defective, but once they had been built, they would not disappear and would remain there forever. However, the main world was large. Who would care about these small caves? They gave you the power to lead you to destruction. Someone from the bold conjecture house of the human spirit sect had discovered this, but he was killed before he could send out this news. You, the Snake Spirit sect, are the stupidest for being willing to be their lackeys. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord said, his voice rising. In the past, he had aimed for the completion of the finale way. But after he had entered Elder Shui's dream, he discovered that the chaos was much more complicated than he had imagined, and that they needed more than the finale way. Chapter 3744, The Broken Bell. During the days of the 77th Chaotic Era, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, the Primeval Lord of Heaven, and the other human heroes had made their judgment. According to them, it took more than 9 million divine megatons of power to complete the finale way. That was what they had concluded under certain conditions. However, such a conclusion turned out to be so rash and childish. In the next chaotic eras, many ruling creatures still wanted to complete the finale way, and the amounts of power they calculated varied. Among them, the Heavenly Obsession Civilization had made an accurate calculation, and at the same time, they figured out that they needed 160 million divine megatons of power to do that. The amount of power they calculated was far greater than what the human race had computed. Still, their result was not comprehensive, nor was it the most precise one. Based on the information Elder Shui had provided, only 10 million divine megatons of power was needed to complete the finale way. After all, the purpose of restarting the whole chaos and entering a cycle of reincarnation was to provide energy to the four pillars. The process of restarting shouldn't consume too much energy. The only thing was that the chaos was different from all the other secondary worlds. The Snake Spirit sect had once transformed the world, and it took a large amount of power to complete the finale way. Furthermore, Elder Shui had said that an exceptionally powerful being existed behind the Snake Spirit King, so the energy needed to complete the finale way would be equivalent to infinite. Halfway through Elder Shui's dream, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord already understood that perhaps the only way to stabilize the chaos situation was to kill the Snake Spirit King. That was a nearly desperate answer. After all, the Snake Spirit King had defeated even the Human Spirit King, the Monkey Spirit King, and the Bird Spirit King. How could the human race or the other races in the secondary world beat him? Those ruling forces that planned to complete the finale way didn't know what kind of powerful opponents they were about to face. If only they knew, they surely would not fight at all. However, it was not until the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord finished passing through the dream when he realized that there was a turning point in this matter. Elder Shui had a way to bear the ancestry-level bloodline. After the disaster in the main world, all the creatures went extinct. None of them, including the Snake Spirit sect, could return to the main world. There was only one smooth passageway existing, and it was the eternal scroll painting. Elder Shui handed over the difficult task to the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord and asked him to select another Shore Realm warrior to obtain the ancestry-level bloodline. Fortunately, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had already completed the seemingly impossible task. Even in the face of the Snake Spirit King, he remained calm and composed, and he had already reached his limit. All the Snake Masters were stunned and speechless upon hearing the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's words. Some of them even secretly glanced at Sewell. Was what the old man had said true? Sewell still stayed in his original posture as he looked down at the human elder below. A little while later, the Snake Spirit King's voice filled Sewell's mind. Kill him. In turn, Sewell said, kill them. Swish, swish, swish. The Snake Masters had prepared for such an event for a long time. Upon Sewell's command, they rushed towards the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord like mad. Although they appeared eager, they still had doubts in their hearts. However, they could not question their king's order. They could only hide their doubts, confusion, and even unease in the back of their minds. Meanwhile, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's eyes narrowed as he raised his hand. Rise, rumble. The earth cracked as the massive mysterious yellow tower rose from the ground. Suppress. Boom. As a result, the mysterious yellow tower crushed the Snake Masters, who had rushed to the front, into pieces. Light of annihilation. Buzz. Then, bright white light enveloped the injured treacherous beings. With the help of the mysterious yellow tower's killing power, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord slew several Snake Masters. It's just a small trick. Go to hell. At that point, Sewell joined the battle, and bone thorns grew all over his body. In the Divine Bell City. At the foot of the big bell sat Augustus in a cross-legged position. He tried to break through to the 20th floor of the mysterious yellow tower. A loud, metallic clang filled the space as the bell rang, and he entered the tower. As soon as he entered, he realized that he had already reached the 20th floor. He was secretly pleased. At that moment, however, the mysterious yellow tower shook violently. He also saw 4 people above him. The news that Rocher had seen the owner of the tower already spread, so of course, Augustus knew about it. Naturally, he wanted to try his luck in the mysterious yellow tower. If he met the owner of the tower, he might be able to get something useful and valuable. He did not expect that he didn't meet the so-called owner of the tower, but he saw 4 young men instead. He croaked, "You." The moment he spoke, Dale turned around and glanced at him. He coldly pointed at him and said, "Get out." An irresistible force had hit Augustus. His head spun, and then he was sent out of the mysterious yellow tower. The bell still rang, which meant that only half of the time had passed. When the other warriors at the other shore realm saw that Augustus came out so soon, they thought he had chosen the other shore token. "What's wrong, Augustus? Did you get the other shore token on the 20th floor?" Bromley and Hallett asked as they came over to him. Augustus was still in a daze. When he came back to his senses, he shook his head and said, "No." "Why, you haven't reached the 20th floor yet?" Bromley asked curiously. In general, with Augustus' strength, it should be quite safe for him to climb up to the 20th floor of the mysterious yellow tower. "I saw 4 people," Augustus uttered. 4. Hallett was slightly shocked. "But one of them kicked me out." Augustus felt wronged and miserable. He did not even get to speak before they drove him out. A frown crossed Bromley's face. "Aside from the 4 people, did you see anything else?" he asked. "The mysterious yellow tower shook so violently that I didn't know anything else," Augustus said and shook his head. The ruined graveyard had many speculations about the mysterious yellow tower. One of those speculations, which Rocher had confirmed, was that the owner of the mysterious yellow tower was most likely a human being, or at least supported the human race. It was evident when Bromley had received special care after he went to the ruined graveyard, and in the changes after the divine land entered the ruined graveyard. According to Lorena, the human race is not a powerful force on the other shore. They will surely encounter strong enemies. "I hope they can get through them safely," Bromley said anxiously. The other shore realm warriors in the ruined graveyard relied on the mysterious yellow tower. If the tower was gone, it would be hard for everyone to progress in their cultivation. "Let me go there and try," Hallett suggested. He suspected that Augustus had offended the people in the tower because he spoke too recklessly. Afterward, Hallett took out his fishing rod and swung it forcefully, about to ring the bell. But before he touched the big bell, it started to ring. Dong! The bell let out a strange chime, and even the people outside the Divine Bell City heard it clearly. In the end, however, the sound became high and sharp. It was so shrill that even the other shore realm warriors couldn't help but cover their ears. Dong! Crack! Suddenly, the sound stopped. A crack appeared in the middle of the big bell, and the bell's surface abruptly curled up. If so many other shore realm warriors hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have thought that someone had destroyed the bell. Chapter 3745, The Burial Land. As the other shore realm warriors in the Divine Bell City saw that the big bell was broken, they were all stunned. They started thinking about who could have done it. It was such an important item for the whole city. The warriors fell silent, in disbelief of what just happened. Hallett was the first to speak. "It wasn't me. I didn't ring the bell," he yelled with sincerity in his eyes. He knew how significant the big bell was to all the other shore realm warriors. Thus, he didn't want to be blamed for breaking it. "You don't have to worry. I saw it." "I don't want to sound mean, but you don't have the ability to do that either," Augustus said. "If no one deliberately destroyed it, then why did it break? What does this mean? Will our cultivation road be cut off? I still want to advance to the upper floors." When the other shore realm warriors realized what the consequences of this event entailed, they all went crazy. Bromley immediately stepped forward and inspected the bell with a serious look in his eyes. Back when Augustus entered the mysterious yellow tower, he already discovered that something was wrong with it. Then, after he got out, they found out that the big bell was destroyed. It could mean that the mysterious yellow tower was most likely in danger. "Let me see it." A non-human creature at the other shore realm walked towards the bell and also inspected it. He was from one of the large races in the ruined graveyard. Not only the human race but also other races would definitely be affected by what happened to the Big Bell. So, all of them expressed concern and thought of a way to fix it. The creature stood in front of the bell with his hands hanging down and head raised. This was his way of cultivation. Buzz, buzz, a burst of green light suddenly came out above his head. As he recited the truth of godly way silently, he slammed his hands on the big bell. Bang, the bell made a deafening sound that reverberated throughout the city. Buzz, buzz, the green light on the head of the creature began to dim. When it completely dissipated, he shook his head and said, "It's no use. I couldn't enter." Then, "It's really broken. Is there no way to fix it? What should we do now?" The other Shore Realm warriors couldn't help but complain loudly. After the creature attempted to enter the mysterious yellow tower through the broken bell, several others also rushed and tried, but they too failed. Even so, the creatures in the ruined graveyard refused to give up. Several races began to gather human masters to try and find a way to repair the bell. They did the simplest and most direct method. The human race formed a group of skilled craftsmen from the divine land to straighten the edge of the bell and carefully fill the gap with metal. After working for 3 whole days and nights, they managed to return the bell to its original state. Then, they tried ringing it again. To make sure that the bell wasn't going to break again, they made a cultivator at the first stage of the other shore realm do it. Clang, 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 the bell seemed to have been repaired physically, but it didn't make the same sound as before. Furthermore, the cultivator who rang the bell still couldn't enter the mysterious yellow tower. At that moment, that was when all their hopes began shattering. They realized that they couldn't repair it anymore. Meanwhile, at the Heavenly Square City in the Jade Pure Realm, the Snake Spirit King was having a conversation with the Black Light. The Snake Spirit King's long tail extended in front of him, and the black light that was embedded in his tail constantly flickered. "So why didn't you even let him finish what he was saying?" the Snake Spirit King asked in a nonchalant tone. "Why would I?" His words were meaningless, the black light responded. Its voice came from within the Snake Spirit King. "Then, is the secondary world really irreversible?" the Snake Spirit King asked again, trying to confirm what he heard. "Didn't I already show you? You would rather believe the words of a mere human." The black light returned the question. "If it is reversible, then why do we have to wait for so long? More than 1,000 chaotic eras have already passed. Even if we calculate that time with the method in main world, it is still more than enough. What now? Are you planning to wait until the next chaotic era?" the Snake Spirit King asked with a serious face. Previously, he wouldn't dare to talk back like this to the black light. He didn't even have the guts to ask about its origin. After all, he owed everything that he had to the black light. Moreover, at any moment, it could also take all of them away. According to their original plan, the Snake Spirit King still needed to wait for a long time. However, he started harboring doubts after all the recent troublesome events. Also, one major factor that contributed to this was how the black light didn't allow him to kill the Bird Spirit King yet. With all these things happening, he grew more impatient. He realized that he couldn't delay their plan any longer. Understanding how Cornelius was currently feeling, the black light fell silent for a moment and eventually said, "I'll give you the permission to open the burial land. Then, I will light up the black lamp and upgrade." The Snake Spirit King's eyes suddenly dilated as they flashed with golden lights. This was exactly what he wanted. This was what he wanted to hear from the black light. According to their original plan, the Snake Spirit King had instructed the Element Spirit civilization to support the Bearing race, the Divine Farmer race, and other known powerful races to completely control the source world. Once they completed the Purge Way, he could wait patiently, as long as the chaos was already under his control. However, now that the evil god had mastered the godly way's great unity, and the source world fell under his control, their situation became extremely complicated. There was no way that their plan was going to go smoothly now. "All right, I'll go ahead and open burial land," the Snake Spirit King said without any hesitation in his eyes. In the entire chaos, there were 2 infamous dangerous places. The first one was the ruined graveyard, and the other one was the burial land. No matter how powerful a creature was, once they entered the 2 places, they wouldn't be able to leave alive. Coincidentally, both places were in the depths of the chaos. For some races that lived in the chaos, they would sometimes accidentally enter these places not knowing that they would be trapped there forever. But most creatures would not leave the source world. In this case, they wouldn't accidentally stumble in these places, so these places only existed in legends. Whoosh! Looked from afar, the burial land appeared like a triangular piece of land. Its surface was dark cyan, and it quietly drifted slowly in the chaos. The burial land was supposed to be a huge land mass, but with over 1,000 kinds of savage races that lived there, it was still very crowded. Meanwhile, a group of red-eyed black birds flew across the black sky. They had just finished hunting for their prey, and the strong smell of blood still lingered on their sharp claws. After finishing their meal, they planned to return to their lair. However, just when they were about to get back, thin claws suddenly clutched on their necks at lightning speed. In an instant, their heads were decapitated and their blood was squeezed out of their bodies. Splash! Streams of blood dripped from the sky. On the ground, there were creatures restlessly waiting with their huge mouths opened wide. They devoured all the blood that poured on them while roaring in excitement. This was a cruel and bloody world. However, even in this kind of chaotic land, a rule was still in place. All of these savage races could fight each other in a barbaric way, but no one should dare to provoke the snake-shaped statue that was located at the center of the burial land. Anyone who even just dared to approach the said statue would be instantly killed, and there had never been an exception in the countless years since its establishment. As time went by, the races living in the land deemed the area as a restricted one. No one ever tried to get close to it because it was already tested. What was the use of caring about the statue's origin if one would already be killed immediately after? That was how the burial land went on. But today, the statue suddenly moved on its own. The black snake left its spot and writhed down on the ground like a living creature. I have never interfered with this place since the moment it was created. But I didn't expect it to be in such a chaotic state. The snake spirit king swept his gaze across the area and was instantly vexed by the strong smell of blood throughout the land. He then controlled the black snake to soar into the sky. As it stopped in midair, a bright red light was released from its eyes. A powerful spiritual sense spread out through the red light that enveloped the entire burial land. Chapter 3746, The Black Lamp. There were over 1,000 savage races in the burial land, yet none of them knew what had just happened. These barbaric races feared nothing, yet that sudden burst of terrifying will had them trembling in their boots. Boom, boom, boom. With the arrival of thunder was a booming voice that spread across the land. 3 streaks of white lightning appeared at the edge of the world, and all creatures that were unfortunate enough to have been struck died instantly before they could even scream. At the same time, the Snake Spirit King's voice spoke to the world. "Do you want strength?" he asked. His voice was encompassing and made even the strongest hearts tremble. Though these savage races were currently in panic, the sheer worship and devotion in their eyes were unmistakable. This black snake's power was truly something divine. I also want that type of power. We can control everything with such level of power. This invincible force can make me strong. The Snake Spirit King's offer filled everyone with excitement and fighting spirit. I want strength. I want power. Master, grant upon us such power. I will pursue this path towards greatness no matter the cost. Their enthusiastic response did not surprise the Snake Spirit King. In fact, he expected it. This world was devoid of morality and order, and these savage races only knew slaughter. They would do anything if it meant more power. Crack! From the place where the 3 streaks of white lightning intersected formed a snake-shaped totem. It was so big and dazzling that it could be seen from across the entire burial land. Go towards the totem, the Snake Spirit King ordered. It is there that you will obtain unprecedented power. As the totem was put in place, the entire burial land began to change shape. A crack split open on each of the 3 sides of the burial land. The land began to morph into something that resembled a 3-mouthed monster. With its job done with, the Snake Spirit King's consciousness returned to the Jade Pure Realm. The burial land is ready, he said to the black light. Let us commence with our plan then, the black light replied. Go and ask the Blood Snake Girl to light up the black lamp. The Snake Spirit King's eyes flashed coldly at the mention of her name. Blood Snake Girl. However, he did as he was asked. A few seconds had just passed when a woman, inlaid on the wall at the side of the chaos, suddenly opened her eyes. She was the Blood Snake Girl. Her eyes shone like 2 beautiful crescent moons. Father, is that you? Activate the evil bead, the Snake Spirit King ordered harshly. The Blood Snake Girl tilted her head. Are you still so stubborn? The Snake Spirit King couldn't help but let out a series of laughter. You know that the only reason I still let you live is to make you see how this all goes down. You will witness who was actually right in the end. There was no need to argue, and the Blood Snake Girl decided to just shut her mouth. She had tried to resist more than 1,000 chaotic eras ago and ended up imprisoned for so long. At this moment, she was somewhat expectant to see her father sport a desperate, helpless expression when he failed in the end. All right, I'll activate the evil bead. Buzz. Soon enough, the aforementioned evil bead above her head began to spin and traces of blood light began to gather within. Whoosh, 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 an unprecedented amount of energy soon surrounded the evil bead. The energy fluctuated like powerful waves across the infinite sea, pushing away the chaotic energy around. 1,000 divine megatons of force. 10,000 divine megatons of force. 1,000,000 divine megatons of force. 10,000,000 divine megatons of force. As time passed, the power hidden within the evil bead increased exponentially. Among all the 10 holy items on the snake spirit sect's holy pillar, it was only the evil dead that had the ability to absorb unlimited energy from the pillar. The terrifying energy was compressed into this small bead. If this energy exploded, even the source world would be unable to withstand it. It was enough to create a huge hole in the source world and destroy hundreds of large provinces. Go ahead and light it up. The blood snake girl sneered. Pop. With a sharp popping sound, the evil bead suddenly released a ray of blood light that flew towards the boundless chaos. The terrifying energy absorbed by the bead was compressed into that single ray of blood light, which shot upward at an incredible speed. Whoosh! At that moment, the pear hill continued to fly in the chaos at high speed. To everyone's surprise, the ray of blood light, as thin as a finger yet faster than anything they'd ever seen, suddenly swept past just 30,000 miles away from them. Had Pear Hill been a little bit slower, it would have gotten penetrated by that ray of blood light. Despite it being 30,000 miles away, the massive energy it contained alerted the powerful warriors in the Pear Hill. The snake goddess, Fuxi, Zen, and the 3 chaos ancient gods looked east at the exact same time they felt an irresistible force suddenly rush past them. What was that? How could there be such great power in the chaos? It was too fast. I couldn't see it. That sudden burst of power came and went so suddenly that there wasn't even any time to process or guess what it had been. A few seconds later, the blood light reached the top of the chaos and hit its thick dome. Crack! With its devastating power, the ray of blood light smashed the dome and revealed a small lamp. It was a small black oil lamp. This lamp had a basic shape and looked positively ancient. Despite the simplicity of its form, however, various complex patterns were engraved on its 4 wooden pedestals. Inside the lamp was a glazed cup and a thin wick. If not for this lamp, the ray of blood light would have been able to pierce straight through the dome. This small, ancient relic was able to withstand such a heavy blow. Withstand, however, wasn't the right word. In truth, the lamp had absorbed all that power. Buzz! The blood-red light circled around the oil lamp and gathered at its wick. Phew! From the darkness, a tiny, blood-red flame came alive. If the powerful warriors of the 4 spirits sect saw what just happened, they would have been immobilized by fear. Back then, the snake spirit sect lit up this very lamp and destroyed everything in the main world. In order to survive, the human and bird spirit sects were forced to escape and seek refuge in the chaos. Now, this harbinger of destruction was once again alive. Countless crystals formed from within the oil lamp and began to spread out onto the chaos. These crystals contained the mysterious power of space. The chaos clouds grew restless when they met with these crystals. They usually floated quietly within the chaos and remained unchanging, unless they were absorbed by other things. Yet now, the presence of these crystals stirred something within these clouds as they began to rapidly absorb the chaotic energy. These chaos clouds that stretched out for trillions of miles were split into tens of thousands of pieces and began to take numerous shapes. By some weird power, the crystals morphed the chaos clouds into the many heads of strange beasts. These strange beasts had a bit of similarity to each other and the expressions they sported looked crazy. As the crystals continued to spread further into the chaos clouds continued to transform and morph into these strange beast heads. They floated quietly in the chaos with their eyes closed. Chapter 3747, Devouring Each Other. Unique creatures were living in the boundless chaos, and the Chaos Winged Beast was one of them. The Chaos Winged Beasts lived in groups and were ferocious. They launched violent attacks on any other creature approaching their lairs. The lairs floated like huge cages in the chaos. These lairs were also living creatures. They had extremely special sensitivity to creatures from afar. Once they did, they would emit a faint stench that guided the Chaos Winged Beasts to find their targets. If the sensed creatures were powerful, the lairs would emit a stronger stench. This served as a warning, reminding the Chaos Winged Beasts to avoid those creatures that inhabited the chaos. Swoosh! The falling crystals absorbed the chaotic energy, turning into huge heads floating in the chaos. A rotten smell started to fill the lairs as if a corpse had been decaying for days. The Chaos Winged Beasts that stayed inside the lairs felt nauseated from the stench and came out. The smell reminded the chaos-winged beasts that terrifying creatures had been surrounding them. When the chaos-winged beasts flapped their wings and soared from their lairs, the sight stupefied them. Many huge heads drifted around. A strong sense of crisis radiated from them even though they didn't move. Wah, 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 the chaos-winged beasts communicated with each other. Any creature had a way of living. If it didn't, it could have already been extinct. The chaos-winged beasts didn't choose to attack the heads rashly. They sent dozens of subordinates to check instead. The subordinates cautiously approached the heads and evaluated them. The heads did not emit any aura of life. They only closed their eyes tightly like huge static rocks that appeared to be dead. Woo, woo, one of the chaos-winged beasts shouted and drew closer to one of the heads. It stretched out its sharp claw, gently touching it. When the tip of its claw landed on the head's surface, its eyes opened suddenly. A blinding light blazed from the pair of huge eyes. The head opened its monstrous mouth, attempting to swallow the chaos-winged beasts. The chaos-winged beasts were fast. As they discovered the danger, they instantly flapped their wings and turned into streaks of black light to escape. However, it was too late. The huge mouth had sucked them all. The chaos-winged beasts were barely enough to fill the gaps of its teeth. Its eyes quickly locked onto the lairs, spotting more to eat. More than 10 lairs were connected, and in the blink of an eye, the head devoured them all. However, the head still felt hungry. To consistently enhance its strength, it needed to swallow everything that could be swallowed. But what more was left to devour in the empty chaos? Soon, it began to target its kind. Swoosh, it flew towards another head and bit it hard. The other head woke up and was provoked to bite back. Both of them tried to devour each other. One of the heads was completely gobbled up by the other, doubling the size of the surviving head. At this point, the head still felt hungry. It fixed its eyes on the next head. With its advantage in size, it was easier for other heads to fall into its prey. It then started to devour other heads. The heads that filled the chaos woke up in various forms and set off devouring each other crazily. The heads that woke up first grew stronger exponentially and stood out from trillions of heads. However, the ones to grow fastest in the chaos were not them, but the burial land on its corner. From the moment the heads were born, the 3 big mouths at the edges of the burial land already began to devour them. It grew larger every time it swallowed a head. After the burial land devoured all the heads around it, its size expanded more than 10 times. As the size of the burial land continued to increase, the speed at which it devoured the heads also doubled. Its 3 mouths opened as wide as a whale's as they devoured the heads. However, the burial land was still too small. Although it was also a primitive land, it had never been paid attention to by the Snake Spirit King. Even though it had expanded more than 10 times, it was still not as big as a province in the Source World. When the crystals landed around the Source World, they turned the chaos clouds into huge heads. As the heads awakened, they did not take their companions as first targets. The huge Source World beside them was enough. Without hesitation, they swarmed towards the Source World. The outer wall of the Source World was several hundred miles thick. Although the heads devoured at a fast speed, it would still take a long time for them to enter the Source World. In the Source World, the evil god floated atop a mountain. In front of him was a ball of colorful waves-blending energy. Although the waves-blending energy was only the size of a fist, it was highly condensed for an explosion enough to destroy large provinces. After the Perihil successfully escaped, the evil god placed his avatars in all the large provinces in the Source World. He visited the major forces and announced to them that he was the ruler of the Source World. When the evil god released the evil intent that spread throughout the Source World, all the super forces and great forces already speculated the presence of a ruler. The evil god's appearance confirmed their intuition. These forces could not separate a large province from the Source World like the Perihil did. They had no other choice but to surrender to the evil god who came to them. However, other than making them surrender to him, the evil god did not take any further action. To him, the creatures in the Source World were no different from ants. Even the several powerful warriors at the Eternal Realm were only slightly stronger ants. The giant ape that suddenly appeared when the Perihil left the Source World lingered in the evil god's thoughts. He asked the former captain to inquire from the Grand Master of Heaven about the giant ape's origin. He didn't know what had happened on the other shore. The Grand Master of Heaven and his people seemed to have disappeared without any response. Therefore, he had to rely on himself. Realizing that there was such a terrifying creature in this world, the evil god became more eager to enhance his strength. On one hand, he wanted to further strengthen his control over the Source World, but on the other, he needed to comprehend the truth power from the waves blending energy. His control over the Source World gradually increased. It wasn't difficult for him to completely control everything, but when he comprehended the way's blending energy, he encountered unsolvable problems. In a short period, he had already understood the embryos of the truth power from the way's blending energy. The 6 embryos corresponded to the abilities of the 6 chaos ancient gods. However, other than the truth power, the evil god had captured something unusual in the way's blending energy. He was lost in thought for several days. Not far away, Edna walked down the ship and draped a black robe that she made over the evil god. The evil god stared at the way's blending energy in front of him and muttered, "The power of the way's blending energy is not just about the 6 kinds of truth power. It should have been thousands of times stronger now. Why is it so weak in my hands? This shouldn't be." Edna couldn't help but shake her head at her husband's situation. Her husband was already the ruler of the source world. Even the leaders of the super forces had already surrendered to him, but he was still obsessed with strength. She pondered whether it was good or bad. Just as the evil god was concentrating, he suddenly heard a strange sound from the source world. He frowned as he directed his sight to the outer wall. His eyes reflected the heads that were frantically devouring it. He raised his eyebrows, puzzled. What are they? Chapter 3748. Difficult to deal with. The Heavenly Martial Province was located at the top of the source world. It was the biggest exit from the source world to the chaos. In the past, the exit of the Heavenly Martial Province had been very bustling and prosperous. The flying ships of trade groups from various races had passed through it to engage in commerce. After all, it was much faster to travel through the chaos than through the crystal walls of those provinces. However, after the evil god took control of the source world, he issued a ban that affected all those making a living in the area. No race in the source world was allowed to go out without permission, otherwise, they would be killed. Because of this, most of the trade in the source world stopped, and even if they were to trade, they could only take the routes within the source world. At the huge exit of the Heavenly Martial Province, there were tens of thousands of merchant ships docking. The people in charge of the flying ships grew depressed. The longer they stayed, the more divine crystals they would lose. They could not do anything about their situation. How long is the ban going to last? Who knows? According to our patriarch, the source world is now being controlled by a human being named the evil god. He can lift the ban whenever he wants. Why? Have all the eternal realm masters in the source world died? Why are they giving him so much power? How could a young man of the human race be so arrogant? Someone shouted, being very indignant. In their eyes, the eternal realm warriors were the top-level masters in the source world, and the evil god was at most at the holy soul realm. How could someone of his stature control the source world? Shish, one of the warriors said, making a gesture with his pointer finger. Don't talk nonsense. I have heard that the evil god is lurking everywhere. Bullshit. Even the eternal realm warriors can't do that, let alone a holy soul realm warrior. Do you think the evil god is at the eternal realm? Do you really dare say he has surpassed those who are far greater than him? One of the people in the area said, devoid of fear. Obviously enough, the man did not believe the evil god could be so powerful. Ever since the other shore environment had changed, there had been no sign of an eternal realm warrior appearing in the world. The newcomers were destined not to reach the eternal realm. They couldn't surpass the eternal realm warriors, therefore, that man thought that the evil god being there was nothing but a rumor told to instill fear within the public. Just as he finished talking, the body of the warrior in front of him suddenly shook, and his face became blurry. As the warrior continued to shake, his body, appearance, and aura began to go a drastic change. None of them knew how this was happening. Soon, from the warrior's body, a new evil god appeared. The evil god stared at the man with a scornful smile and asked, "The eternal realm? Tell me, what is that?" The man who made those rude remarks earlier was left shocked, unable to throw out his words. He stammered, You are. I'm the evil god, the evil god said, completing his sentence. I didn't mean to. Don't kill me, the man begged, making it more difficult to control his urge to cry. He didn't expect for the evil god to truly be able to hear all that was being said from every corner of the source world. He feared he had realized this too late. Why should I kill you? The evil god showed a puzzled expression. It was difficult to determine if it were genuine or not. Don't you want to kill me? The man asked, a glimmer of hope sparkling from within his heart. You are a broad-minded man. Please don't take my words seriously, he continued. The evil god chuckled at him. I won't kill innocent people indiscriminately, especially when I need more people. But I will possess your body, he uttered, coming toward the man. Possess. The man's body began to tremble, and his face began to blur. In the blink of an eye, he had become the second evil god. Although the evil god did have the ability to monitor all the creatures in the source world, it was still considerably large, requiring an enormous amount of effort from him. There were countless creatures in it. If someone cursed the evil god would not be able to find the culprit from all those who were there. Unfortunately, the evil god happened to come to the heavenly martial province to deal with the heads outside of the source world, so he naturally heard the two's ongoing conversation on the flying ship. When the others on the ship saw this scene, they couldn't even dare to breathe. They did not want to attract the evil god's attention. If their bodies were occupied by the evil god, who knew whether they would come out of the possession dead or alive? However, the evil god did not have the intention of possessing other people's bodies. Instead, he looked at the heavenly martial province's exit leading to the chaos. This was the weakness of the source world. The speed at which the heads bit and devoured things was very fast, and they nearly bit through the heavenly martial province. Crack, crack, crack. At this time, a harsh biting sound came from near the exit. The sound was incredibly loud, and every time it was transmitted, the entire heavenly martial province trembled. What's that sound? Creatures in the chaos. Are they attempting to enter the source world? The people of different races on the flying ships discussed in a hushed tone. The evil god waved his hand at the trade groups. All the flying ships, retreat. When the people on the flying ships heard the evil god say this, they did not even dare to stay any longer. They steered their flying ships and retreated immediately, desperate to get out. Crack, crack, crack. The sound near the exit was getting louder and louder, and the heavenly martial province quaked more and more violently. Unlike the others, the evil god did not try to rush out of the source world rashly. It was not because he was timid. It was because it was unnecessary for him. It was abnormal for these heads to appear in the chaos all of a sudden. The evil god's intuition told him that this was not a simple matter. He knew he had to be more cautious in dealing with this. Boom, boom, the exit of the heavenly martial province finally collapsed. The flying ships of the trade groups opened their shields at the same time, trying to protect themselves. They had traveled around the source world for a long time and were very familiar with the environment of the chaos. Once the exit collapsed, a large amount of chaotic energy would surge in. They opened their shields to block the chaotic energy coming to engulf them. However, what they didn't know was that the chaos clouds in the entire chaos had disappeared, being replaced by the huge heads. Therefore, the moment the exit collapsed, it was not the chaotic energy that surged in, but fierce heads. After they devoured the outer wall of the source world, their bodies expanded in a second. Each head was 1 million feet high, like a mountain flying in the air, and these heads were off to bite people. About 200 heads are invading the heavenly martial province. Someone screamed. Buzz, buzz. The two evil gods raised their hands at the same time, and the waves blending energy gathered upon their palms. A trace of space truth enveloped the waves blending energy. After a few moments, the waves blending energy disappeared from the hands of the evil gods and appeared right in front of the two heads. These heads could not discern the matters of the outside world. They only had one purpose: eat. They would devour both energy and materials. If it were possible, they would surely even devour the void. Facing the sudden waves blending energy, the heads swallowed it without hesitation. Explode, the two evil gods commanded at the same time. Bang, bang, the waves blending energy exploded. A blazing white light flashed from within the mouths of the heads, causing them to explode into countless pieces. Cheers came from the flying ships in the distance. Amazing, 2 huge heads have been killed just like that. However, the evil god's face darkened. He had planned to kill all the heads with the explosion created by the waves blending energy, but the strength of these heads greatly exceeded his expectations. He had underestimated them greatly. About 200 heads were no threat to the source world, but the evil god knew there were more of them coming. There were probably millions of heads crazily biting on the outer wall of the source world. Their number was increasing exponentially. He knew that if he did not stop the heads, the entire source world would be bitten into pieces. As the evil god thought of this, the 200 or so people on the flying ships began to convulse, and their features began to disappear from their faces. After a few seconds, they all turned into about 200 evil gods, raising their hands to release bursts of waves blending energy. Bang, 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 the waves blending energy appeared in the mouths of about 200 heads. This destroyed them in an instant, and shards from the rupture of the heads fell to the ground at a dramatic rate. Chapter 3749, The Trouble of the Pear Hill. Once he had taken over the source world, the evil god had grown complacent, seeing he was in a most advantageous position. However, He never expected that the chaos would undergo tremendous change so soon. The millions of heads that were nibbling at the source world were like leeches that latched onto the evil god's body, sucking at his life force. If he didn't get rid of these things soon, he would be in trouble. The only solution he could think of was to mobilize the major forces in the source world to join forces with his tens of thousands of avatars. Together, they'd launch a massive attack. He wasn't sure whether he'd be able to get rid of the heads this way, but at this point, he had no other choice. Wherever there were chaos clouds, the heads would appear. From the depths of the chaos, some of the weaker races and forces were devoured by these heads. Even the famous top 10 beasts in the chaos were in grave danger. At first, they traveled about the chaos quickly, fighting off these crazy enemies. However, after a while, they started to grow desperate. No matter where they went, these strange heads loomed everywhere. It seemed they occupied the entire chaos. Why was this happening? How many heads were there? No one could answer these questions. Not long after the heads showed up, the Pear Hill, which was flying at a high speed, also encountered them. Kendrick was the first to sense the existence of the heads, because some of the heads had crashed into his enchanted barrier, immediately alerting him to their presence. Ordinary creatures would have instantly shattered into pieces at such a violent impact. After all, the entire Pear Hill was moving at an incredibly high speed. Not only did those heads emerge from the blow unscathed, they opened their wide mouths to reveal rows of sharp teeth and chomped down on the enchanted barrier. To Kendrick's surprise, the heads seemed to be eating the enchanted barrier. This meant that these vicious heads were capable of devouring both substances and energies. Judson, Gerald, some strange things have appeared in the chaos, Kendrick alerted them. We see them, Gerald said calmly from the jadeite platform. Suddenly, the chaos clouds in the distance began to surge. Countless heads emerged from the chaos clouds, all rushing towards the flying Pear Hill. Will it be easy to deal with them? Judson asked. They can devour the enchanted barrier, answered Kendrick, frowning unhappily. But it shouldn't be too hard to kill them. Dozens of big and small rings suddenly appeared on the enchanted barrier on the east side of the Pear Hill. These rings shrank towards the heads, and then transparent swords appeared on the surface of the enchanted barrier. Puff, puff, puff. The transparent swords smashed the heads into pieces swiftly. They have been disposed of, reported Kendrick. Is it just this area that's problematic, or is the entire chaos filled with these things? Gerald asked, his voice hinting at concern. There seems to be too many of these heads. Are they related to that terrifying energy? Judson asked. Who knows? Anyway, we have to be careful. Even as Kendrick spoke, the Pear Hill was rushing towards a large group of heads. Moments earlier, it was just a large chaos cloud. Now, it turned into thousands upon thousands of strange heads, and the Pear Hill was heading straight for them. Bang, bang, bang. As soon as the heads smashed into the enchanted barrier, they sank their teeth into it and chomped on it like crazy. Go to hell, trillions of enchanted barrier swords. The enchanted barrier began to shake violently, as countless swords pierced through the surface of the enchanted barrier and shot towards the heads. However, more and more heads kept bumping into the enchanted barrier around the Pear Hill. No matter how many they killed, more took their places. Trillions of enchanted barrier swords. Trillions of enchanted barrier swords. Kendrick gritted his teeth. The situation was looking grim, but he kept on attacking the heads. Even the truth power of the Chaos Ancient God was limited. On one hand, these heads would absorb Kendrick's power, and on the other hand, using trillions of enchanted barrier swords would cost a lot of truth power. After a few more rounds, Kendrick had exhausted a lot of truth power, but the number of heads did not decrease. Instead, more and more heads appeared. Only then did he realize exactly how serious the situation was. Gerald, Judson, you need to help me. Judging from what we're seeing right now, we will need backup, Gerald said as he eyed the countless strange heads eating the enchanted barrier. Soon, the Eternal Realm warriors of the Pear Hill were gathered on the jadeite platform. When Zen, the snake goddess, Fuxi, Eastern Emperor Tai and the others saw these heads, they were also extremely confused and shocked. These heads, where are they from? Why is the chaos suddenly so terrifying? Can you hold them off, Master Kendrick? Kendrick replied impatiently, no, I can't. At this point, there were about 40,000 heads lying on the enchanted barrier of the Pear Hill. Kendrick's truth power was nearly completely exhausted. Once the enchanted barrier collapsed, it would be a catastrophe. Then, we shall fight, the snake goddess said decisively. Then, she dragged her shadow to the surface of the enchanted barrier. The shadow that was attached to her body stretched out her hands, and tens of thousands of energy beams shot across the surface of the enchanted barrier, slicing through the heads as they went. Zen, Fuxi, Eastern Emperor Tai, and Yasmin also quickly joined in on the action. With the help of the blood-controlling method, their current combined strength was definitely a force to be reckoned with. With all these Eternal Realm warriors fighting side by side, all of the heads that were lying on the surface of the enchanted barrier were killed. However, it wasn't long before the pair bumped into more heads. Some even had the audacity to chomp on Zen, the snake goddess, and the others, trying to devour them. Bang, 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 Zen and his companions swiftly got rid of the heads, but when they turned around, they frowned slightly. Even more heads had latched onto the enchanted barrier, their sharp teeth biting at it viciously. Kill all of them. The snake goddess's face crumpled with rage, and a malicious aura emanated from her body. The Eternal Realm warriors and the Chaos Ancient Gods continued to launch attacks on the strange heads. However, Zen suddenly stopped. The voice of the ancestry-level bloodline from his inner world was trying to tell him something. Zen, it's useless for you to do this. Zen immediately stopped in his tracks. Why? These things are all over the entire chaos, and there are trillions of them. How could you possibly kill them all? You will only be devoured by them, little by little, until your numbers dwindle, the ancestry-level bloodline said. They're all over the entire chaos? Zen asked, his expression horrified. In a sense, these heads are your food, so there is no need for you to kill them, the ancestry-level bloodline added. My food. Zen's mind was whirling. The ancestry-level bloodline continued, the downgrading has begun again. Their first step is to turn the chaos into their own world. How? The more heads are devoured, the bigger the primitive land will become, until the primitive land fills the entire chaos. This is a game that only a primitive land can play, the ancestry-level bloodline said seriously. Primitive land as big as the chaos. A trace of fear appeared in Zen's eyes, but at the same time, he was a little confused. Why do they do this? What does this have to do with the downgrading? Chapter 3750, Another Way. Even the biggest source world was but an island in the huge ocean that was the chaos. They were definitely not on the same level. What would it be like to expand the primitive land to such a massive size as the chaos? What kind of power would the ruler of this primitive land possess? Previously, these secondary worlds could also be considered a type of downgrading, but they could not be considered perfect, a kind of pseudo-downgrading, if you will, the ancestry-level bloodline explained. Through complicated methods, the secondary worlds could be reversed and restored to the main world. So it was possible to reverse secondary worlds. Zen raised his eyebrows. Yes, the ancestry-level bloodline said. However, if the Snake Masters unify the whole chaos and complete the downgrade, then there will be no turning back for the main world. By then, the entire main world will collapse, and the chaos will be able to expand indefinitely, occupying all the space of the main world. Sounds good, Zen said with a smile. As creatures living in the secondary world, the third-grade world was obviously more suitable for Zen and the others. He had been at a loss in the higher-level abstruse energy world. In other words, the creatures in the third-grade worlds and the four-grade worlds were against each other. But the Snake Spirit King's goal is to return to the main world, right? Is he really going to ruin his plan by doing this? Zen asked suddenly. From the very beginning, the Snake Spirit King was wrong. He will definitely pay for his stubbornness, the ancestry-level bloodline replied. Now, you must devour as many of these heads as you can so that you may expand your primitive land. Only by seizing this opportunity can you defeat the other party in the competition. How? I will help you. The edge of Zen's primitive land suddenly cracked, forming a crack that was 1,000 miles wide. As soon as the crack was formed, groups of heads started to chomp on it from the outside. But as soon as the heads started to bite down, countless bamboo shoots shot out from the crack and began to intertwine with each other. Crack, 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 the bamboo shoots rammed into the heads, chewing down on them till they were ground to pieces. So, these are truly teeth. Zen's eyes widened. Yes, replied the ancestry-level bloodline calmly. It had been preparing for this day ever since it entered Zen's primitive land. Now that the heads had finally appeared, it was time for it to show what it was truly capable of. After the primitive land devoured the first batch of heads, Zen suddenly felt his cinnabar field swelling slightly. He raised his eyebrows and asked, is the primitive land expanding again? The more heads it devours, the faster the expansion will be, the ancestry-level bloodline explained. As soon as it finished speaking, the crack at the edge of the primitive land once again opened, and a large group of heads rushed in eagerly. Zen couldn't believe what was happening. In such a short period of time, the primitive land had expanded threefold. Zen drew his gaze from the primitive land and looked at Fuxi, the snake goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others. They were still trying their best to destroy those heads. Only then did Zen understand what the ancestry-level bloodline meant. These heads were all his food, and his alone. It was really a waste to kill them like this. Zen's gaze swept across the chaos, and at the same time, he used the mother butterfly to sense the location of his inner world. After a while, he said loudly, "You can't kill all these heads." The snake goddess made her shadow slash several heads into two pieces. "That's true, but we can't just sit still and wait for death," she said bluntly. "I have found another way," said Zen. Zen's words made the others stop in their tracks. They all looked at him expectantly. With their combined strength, they could protect the Pear Hill for some time, perhaps days or maybe even weeks. But their bloodline power would eventually grow exhausted. The same went for the three Chaos Ancient Gods. It was only a matter of time before the Pear Hill was devoured. The people inside the Pear Hill knew this, and were now in a state of panic. No matter where they stood, they could see strange flying heads gnawing at their enchanted barrier. Even the citizens of the large cities were filled with uneasiness. The snake goddess then asked Zen with narrowed eyes, "What way?" Zen didn't reply right away, as he did a rough calculation inwardly. Finally, he said, "Try your best to draw the heads to the west." Right now, Zen's primitive land was right in the west of the Pear Hill. After having flown in the chaos for so long, they were slowly closing the distance. They would meet each other in a day at most. "And then?" asked Fuxi, brows furrowed tightly. "Let the Pear Hill enter my primitive land," replied Zen. The several Eternal Realm warriors and three Chaos Ancient Gods were stunned. Kendrick asked, "Are you kidding? How could your inner world accommodate the Pear Hill?" Although the Pear Hill was a mountain, it was as big as a large province in the Source world. Although Zen's primitive land had expanded, it was still incomparably small next to the Pear Hill. "Has your primitive land expanded again? Can it accommodate the Pear Hill?" the snake goddess asked urgently. "No," Zen said as he shook his head. "As of right now, it's only as big as 1% of the Pear Hill." "Then how could the Pear Hill possibly enter it?" Kendrick asked impatiently. "My primitive land rapidly expands when it eats these heads," Zen explained, pointing at the hungry heads in the sky. "If it can devour all of the heads, then accommodating the Pear Hill won't be a problem." "How does the primitive land swallow the heads?" Eastern Emperor Tai asked, still dumbfounded. "Let me lure these heads to the west," the snake goddess said, ignoring him. At this point, they were out of ideas. Whether they liked it or not, they had no choice but to follow Zen. With a gentle wave of the snake goddess's hand, the energy beams from her shadow became as thin as spider threads. In this way, her shadow could reach a farther distance. While multitudes of those strange heads kept chasing and intercepting the Pear Hill, there were countless more that hadn't even woken up yet. The thread-like energy beams floated past the motionless heads, immediately waking them up. Using their keen intuition, those newly awakened heads locked in on the Pear Hill as their target. Originally, there were about 300,000 heads chasing after the Pear Hill, but after the energy beams spread out like a beacon, there were now over 1 million heads chasing after them. Eastern Emperor Tai was horrified when he saw how densely packed the heads were, chomping on the enchanted barrier. He couldn't help but say, "Snake Goddess, your ability to lure them is so powerful." The snake goddess glanced at Zen questioningly. Zen said, "Don't stop. Lure in more of them." With a wave of the snake goddess's hands, her shadow extended even farther. More heads awoke and started to chase after the Pear Hill. After a few hours, tens of millions of heads followed closely behind the Pear Hill. The Eternal Realm warriors and the three Chaos Ancient Gods eyed them anxiously. If these heads caught up to the Pear Hill, they were done for. Chapter 3751, Feast on the Heads. It was truly horrifying to see a massive army of heads follow behind the Pear Hill. Everyone in the Pear Hill, ranging from mountain leaders, sect leaders, Eternal Realm warriors, to ordinary citizens, all felt chills run down their spines. If there was even a slight mistake, the Pear Hill would meet its end right now. I didn't expect that the chaos would be so dangerous. Was it a wrong choice for the Pear Hill to have left the Source world? The chaos should be filled with chaotic energy. Where has the chaotic energy gone, and why are there so many horrible heads? Who knows, maybe the snake goddess can answer your question. Quote, "The people on the roof of the gate tower and on the hillside couldn't do anything but look up and pray." Swoosh. Until now, the snake goddess still did not stop luring the heads. Her shadow, which had condensed behind her, increasingly got smaller and dimmer. It had all turned into thin energy beams and floated farther away, to help Zen lure more heads. The entire pear hill was like a fishing boat that sailed in the deep sea, while the shadow of Snake Goddess was akin to a large fishing net that caught the heads one after another. If it goes on like this, the number of heads would probably exceed 100 million, the Snake Goddess said as she stared at Zen. Zen, are you sure about your plan? She asked. I'm not sure, Zen confessed. Fuxi, the Snake Goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others were speechless. A few hours later, Zen used the mother butterfly once again to locate the primitive land. It turned out that it was already quite close. Is that the primitive land? The Snake Goddess suddenly asked. Somewhere in front of Pear Hill was a small, brown oblate ball. Because everyone was still a bit far from it, the ball looked like it was as tiny as a pea to their eyes. Yes, Zen nodded. Although his avatar in his inner world had been to the outside of the primitive land, he had not seen its entirety. It was also his first time to see what it was truly like. Blue stripes covered the brown oblate ball's surface, and there was a crack on its side. From afar, the primitive land was like an oval clamshell. Should I control the pear hill to go there directly? Judson asked. Zen's eyes narrowed into slits, and he thought for a moment. Then, he nodded and said, yes, but don't bump into the primitive land. Control the pear hill to fly around it. Got it, Judson answered. The large circular structure behind the pear hill was like its helm. This circular structure controlled the direction it went. Since Judson was the one who had constructed it, he was like the captain who steered the pear hill. Boom, boom, the large circular structure slightly tilted upwards, and the energy it released also changed its direction. In turn, the pear hill's angle changed, and it began to rush towards the bottom of the primitive land. 5 minutes later, the pear hill passed by the primitive land from below. Even though the primitive land was only 1% of the size of the pear hill, it was still a massive piece of land. When the two intersected, everyone felt as if a large city had skimmed over the top of the pear hill, then the primitive land plunged into the army of heads that followed behind the pear hill. It's your show time, Zen said as his voice traveled over the primitive land. The ancestry-level bloodline had waited for a long time. The primitive land hit the large group of heads, and at the same time, the crack on its edge had opened. Hundreds of heads passively went into the primitive land. Crack, crack, the plants that resembled bamboo shoots intertwined then chewed the huge heads into pieces. Previously, the primitive land had devoured only a small amount of heads, and the teeth, formed by the 2 rows of bamboo shoot-shaped plants were enough to deal with them. Now, the heads from the chaos arrived in a large group, and many of them still escaped from the teeth. Worse, some of them rushed to the continents in the center after they entered the primitive land. When Zen saw that the situation had gone awry, he had no choice but to form an avatar in his inner world to protect those continents. The ancestry-level bloodline had also realized this problem, so it activated its power once again. Just then, a rumble came from the primitive land, and more rows of bamboo shoot-shaped plants quickly grew out. These plants shot up in a crisscross manner and occupied almost 1/4 of the primitive land, which made it hard for the heads to pass through them. Crack, crack, the faster the heads were devoured, the faster the primitive land expanded. By the time the primitive land eliminated the group of heads, its size had more than doubled. Swoosh, it took nearly 2 hours for the massive pear hill to adjust its direction. Afterward, it drew an arc in the chaos that was 10 million miles long to lure those heads towards the primitive land again. When the primitive land had doubled in size, its ability to devour heads also doubled. This was the second time the primitive land and the pear hill had passed by each other. The primitive land swallowed over 1 million heads, and its size doubled again. Now, it was almost 1/20th the size of the pear hill. The primitive land sure expands quite fast, Fuxi muttered, his eyes full of surprise. Of course, Gerald, Judson, and Kendrick were also shocked. They had floated in the chaos for quite a long time and had seen some unique spaces within it. However, they had never seen anything as unique as Zen's primitive land. After it swallowed 2 batches of heads, it expanded 4 times, equivalent to 1/20th of the pear hill's size, the Snake Goddess said as her eyes lit up. If there are enough heads for the primitive land to devour for 5 more times, it would be even bigger than the pear hill. She exclaimed. All of them had been anxious at first, but now they were full of hope. Without saying a word, Judson adjusted the helm for the 3rd time. As Zen stared at the primitive land that went further away, he asked, Ancestry-level bloodline, why didn't those heads attack the primitive land directly? Why did they go inside the crack in the primitive land instead? Those heads were quite insane. They bit and devoured anything they saw. However, when they reached the primitive land, they quietly bypassed the other areas and went straight inside the primitive land's big mouth. That was rather odd. Those heads only know to devour everything, and they are quite stupid. Look at the blue lines outside the primitive land, the ancestry-level bloodline said. These are a net formed by the power of space. It can cover the whole primitive land, the ancestry-level bloodline explained. A space net, Zen murmured. At that moment, he thought of the evil god and the source world. Since the heads had spread all over the chaos, the source world had probably encountered numerous attacks from them. He did not know if the evil god had found a way to deal with them. If he did not, then the source world would probably suffer a disaster, the tens of thousands of races and creatures that lived in it included. At that point, the Pear Hill had passed by the primitive land for the third time. The fourth time, the fifth time, every time the two territories passed by each other, the primitive land's size increased, and more of the heads that followed closely behind the Pear Hill were subsequently devoured by the primitive land. When the Pear Hill passed by the primitive land for the sixth time, the latter appeared to be half the size of Pear Hill, and had devoured nearly one-third of the heads already. The seventh time the Pear Hill passed by the primitive land, half of the heads remained behind the Pear Hill still, but the primitive land was slightly larger than it. Chapter 3752, Shadows. Currently, Zen's primitive land was already large enough to accommodate the entire Pear Hill. However, if they wanted to let the Pear Hill inside the primitive land, they had to slow it down first. The problem was that over 40 million heads were chasing behind the Pear Hill. Once it slowed down, it would then be engulfed by the sea of heads. Therefore, they had no choice but to change its direction once again and flew past the primitive land for the eighth time. Whoosh! In an instant, they redirected the Pear Hill in the other direction. The huge mouth of the primitive land was still wide open. It could actually devour the entire Pear Hill and the millions of heads in one gulp. Buzz! Buzz! The heads chasing behind weren't fast enough to change their trajectories, so they drilled directly into the mouth of the primitive land. After swallowing the heads, the primitive land expanded again at an incredible rate. In an instant, its size doubled again. Now, it was more than twice the size of the Pear Hill. But more importantly, the heads that were chasing after the Pear Hill were finally gone. There was not a single one to be seen in the void anymore. Without them chasing the Pear Hill, it could now begin to slow down. However, with such a huge mountain moving at a high speed, it would take much time and effort to slow it down. It took them an hour to finally decrease its speed to 1,000 feet per 3 seconds. Then, they positioned the Pear Hill to fly directly towards the primitive land. When they were just dozens of miles away, the primitive land opened its big mouth, waiting for the Pear Hill to drill into it. Everything went quite well. Zen and the Eternal Realm warriors were finally relieved to see that they were going to be safe. However, what they didn't expect was that the primitive land actually brought fear to the creatures of the Pear Hill. It was partly their fault because they didn't explain to the residents of Pear Hill what the primitive land really was. The heads were all gone. I think they were eaten by that huge monster. Wait, that monster increased its size again. Is it trying to devour the Pear Hill? We're doomed. Only Zen and the Eternal Realm warriors knew what the primitive land was. Thus, it was natural for the hundreds of millions of creatures residing in the Pear Hill to shiver in fear in the face of this enormous monster. As the Pear Hill rushed steadily to the mouth of the primitive land, panic spread quickly. Several mountain leaders flew towards the snake goddess and asked why they weren't changing the direction of the Pear Hill, and why it seemed like they were drilling into a huge clam monster's body on purpose. Did they just refer it as a clam monster? After taking a better look at the primitive land, Zen finally saw what they were talking about. He smiled bitterly as he stared at the primitive land that actually looked like a huge clam with many sharp teeth. The snake goddess wasted no time and explained to the mountain leaders what really was going on. When the mountain leaders learned the truth, they quickly bowed their heads and apologized for their intrusion. However, they knew that all the people were still panicking, so they said, "We're glad that the Pear Hill is all right. But please tell the people what's going on. It'll be better if the information comes directly from you to alleviate their worries." "I understand. It's my fault that I put this matter aside as we were focused on how to ensure the safety of the Pear Hill." "Don't worry, I'll speak to them," the snake goddess responded with sincerity. Immediately after, she took a deep breath, and a penetrating voice quickly spread in the entire Pear Hill. "People of the Pear Hill, please don't panic. There have been huge changes in the chaos. As you saw earlier, there were heads everywhere, and there are other things that are currently going on. Right now, we have to find a safe place to hide. That huge clam-like monster is actually Zen Luo's inner world. Once we enter it, we should be safe. The other mountain leaders, the sect leaders and members, and even the citizens in the cities were all shocked as they heard what the snake goddess said. They all knew that building an inner world wasn't an easy task. Zen's inner world could even float within the chaos. That was new to them. And to top it all, Zen's inner world was so enormous that it could accommodate the entire Pear Hill. Although it sounded inconceivable and insane, they believed the words of the snake goddess. After all, she had high prestige in the Pear Hill. Both the snake goddess race and the human race fully put their trust in her. With that, the people of the Pear Hill finally calmed down. At the same time, on one of the peaks, Elvinia was standing there with a surprised look on her face as she heard the snake goddess mention Zen's name. It had been a while when she last saw him. She didn't expect that Zen's inner world had already grown so large. Whoosh! Finally, the Pear Hill started to slowly enter the primitive land. Everyone's attention was caught as they saw rows of plants that resembled bamboo shoots above. As the primitive land continued to expand, these plants also grew bigger and stronger. If they pressed down, the entire Pear Hill would be instantly crushed. The entire process of sending the Pear Hill inside the primitive land lasted for about 16 hours. Once it was done, Zen said to Kendrick, "Master Kendrick, please remove your enchanted barrier." Buzz, buzz. The enchanted barrier that was attached to the surface of the Pear Hill gradually disappeared. A wave then came from the vast blood mist in the sky, and slender plants emerged from the sea. The plants flew up from all directions, drilled into the bottom part of the Pear Hill, and firmly fixed it to the ground of the primitive land. Zen's inner world would continue to expand, meaning that some unpredictable dangers might occur. To prevent the Pear Hill from rolling further inside, the ancestry-level bloodline came up with this method to stabilize its hold on the primitive land. "Zen, I actually have a question if you don't mind." "What are you now?" Fuxi asked as he approached Zen. "What do you mean? Is there something wrong with me?" Zen asked with a confused look on his face. "Well, since you are now in your own inner world, doesn't that make you an avatar?" Fuxi tried to explain with a smile. The snake goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai, and the others looked at Zen as they heard Fuxi asking him this question. They were also curious about this. Zen was now inside his own inner world. It was like saying that a big cup was holding a small gourd, but at the same time, the big cup was inside the small gourd. This would create a logic paradox. Was the cup the one holding the gourd, or was it the other way around? However, it was truly happening right now. One thing's for sure. This body is not my avatar. Then Zen pointed to the space beside him and said, "But this is." Upon saying those words, an avatar that took his image gradually condensed. The aura emitted by the avatar was exactly the same as his. Soon after, more and more avatars appeared one by one. In a short while, there were over 100 avatars that stood beside Zen. Each of them possessed extraordinary strength. "Really?" Fuxi exclaimed. Although Fuxi's strength had already increased dramatically, he instantly perceived that he wouldn't be able to deal easily with even one of those avatars. Even if they didn't use any theurgy, Zen's avatars could kill Fuxi effortlessly. And to think that Zen could easily summon over 100 of them, one could just imagine how strong Zen had finally become. "Well, it seems that we will become members of Zen's inner world." Eastern Emperor Tai let out a deep sigh. "The battle and the chaos has far exceeded our imagination," the snake goddess said calmly. Zen stood beside her, listening intently to what she was saying with furrowed brows. "The Pear Hill is lucky to have this world to serve as its shelter. The Pear Hill is lucky to have this world to serve as its shelter. The Pear Hill is lucky to have this world to serve as its shelter." Zen was surprised when he heard that the snake goddess's words repeated a few times. He felt a strange wave run through his head. He was holding his head as if he was experiencing a mild headache. "Zen, what happened? Are you all right?" The snake goddess instantly noticed that Zen was acting a little strange. Zen just shook his head and said, "Yes, I'm fine." He then waved his hand, making all his avatars disappear. With his current state, he shouldn't have any auditory hallucinations. He thought that perhaps it was because he summoned too many avatars at the same time. However, just when he dispersed his avatars, he noticed that there were shadows all over the sky. As he looked at the snake goddess beside him, there were also more than a dozen shadows that surrounded her. He tried to look around and he saw that there were more than 10 shadows of Pear Hill. What's going on? Why is the world full of shadows? Chapter 3753, Variable Images. These shadows appeared to be real and not mere hallucinations. Zen shook his head and stared at them. However, they all gathered back together instantly. Surely, they must have all come, somehow, from the people they resembled, and they were now like overflowing water, about to spread out at any time. The strange visions persisted for a few moments more before Zen finally broke out of his stupor. Fuxi, the snake goddess, Eastern Emperor Tai and the others all gathered around him, concern written across their faces. At Zen's level of cultivation, he couldn't possibly become this disoriented unless he was confronted with a powerful soul pressure. But who in Zen's inner world was that powerful? Zen, are you all right? The snake goddess asked worriedly. As the visions faded away, Zen came to his senses. He looked around in a daze. I saw numerous shadows just now. Shadows? You must be mistaken. They were probably hallucinations, Fuxi replied, furrowing his brows. Zen must be so fatigued facing so much pressure that he was starting to see things. Hallucinations? Zen frowned. They didn't seem to be hallucinations, or afterimages. They seemed real. What? The snake goddess, Fuxi, and Eastern Emperor Tai stared at Zen, not comprehending. However, Zen became more and more convinced he was right. He pointed at the distance. I saw 12 snake goddesses, 10 Fuxis, 11 pear hills, and 6 Eastern Emperor Tai's. They were really there. Fuxi gave Zen a blank look. Finally, he burst out, crazy. You've gone crazy. I haven't, Zen said calmly. There must be something wrong with this place, not me. All right, let's say there's an anomaly in this space. But why would there be 12 of me? The snake goddess asked seriously. Compared to Fuxi, the snake goddess was more inclined to trust Zen. If Zen said that what he saw was real, then she chose to believe him. I don't know. Zen shook his head. The number of the visions of the people varied. The snake goddess had the largest number, and Eastern Emperor Tai had the least. Zen couldn't figure out what the determining factors possibly could be. The variable images. Zen, what you saw might have been the variable images. Gerald's voice suddenly floated over from the jadeite platform. Zen and the snake goddess turned to look at Gerald and approached him at the platform. The snake goddess was the first to ask. What is the variable image? Only people with a deep knowledge of space can see the variable images, Gerald continued. In this round of chaos, the first person to see the variable images was Othniel. After comprehending the truth of space, he saw the variable images several times. I remember that he had tried to show it to us, Kendrick, who was beside Gerald, added. It was only in the early stages of chaos that the 6 chaos ancient gods had no conflict with each other, so what Kendrick said must have happened in the earlier stages of the world. Yes, he said I had 20 variable images, Gerald recalled. Kendrick had 17, and Othniel himself had the least number, only 8. But what exactly are those variable images? The snake goddess pressed, more curious than the others. I'm not sure, Gerald said. Othniel had carefully observed the variable images, and he said that they were all just versions of the same people. So I really have 12 versions of myself? The snake goddess said, bewildered. That's what Othniel said. His understanding of space had reached an unfathomable level, far beyond our knowledge, said Gerald. But from the perspective of life, I don't agree with what he said. Gerald, who controlled the truth of life, had his own definition for it. I remember Othniel saying that, normally, one's variable images overlapped with themselves completely, so that even if he strained the truth of space to the limit, he would never be able to perceive them. Only when the time sequence in the entire chaos fluctuated and they became out of sync did the images become perceptible to him, Gerald continued. A fluctuation in the time sequence. When does that happen? Zen asked. You must have all experienced it before, said Gerald. The snake goddess's eyes lit up first. I know, it was with the shade stone. Yes, Gerald nodded. Whenever the shade stone appears, there will be subtle fluctuations in the time sequence of the chaos. It was at this time that Othniel would see the images. According to legends in the source world, the shade stones had fallen from the hourglass of time. It was said the shade stones could calculate the lifespan of the chaos. A short time after Zen had arrived at the source world, he had also had a shade stone merged into his body. However, after inheriting the ancestry-level bloodline, his body, in a way, had been rebuilt. He found that both the shade stone and the chaotic source spirits had disappeared. Maybe there was another shade stone appearing in the source world just now, and you have reached an understanding of space comparable to Othniel's, which is why you are now more sensitive to the fluctuation of the time sequence of chaos and can see those variable images, Gerald mused aloud. Such an explanation made sense. After all, now that Zen had mastered the ancestry-level bloodline, his attainments in space could match that of the chaos ancient gods. Coincidentally, a shade stone just descended, and Zen was able to see the variable images. But what were these variable images? If Othniel hadn't known, it was impossible for Zen to know now. Enough about the variable images. I'm more concerned about the ruin graveyard right now, the snake goddess pronounced. The ruin graveyard was a world floating in the chaos, also vulnerable to an attack by the heads at any moment now. Right, the ruin graveyard is also in danger. Zen clapped his hands, suddenly alert. According to their previous plan, once the pear hill went into his inner world, they would turn it around to search for the ruin graveyard. With the help of the mother butterfly, Zen could easily sense the positions of the primitive land and the ruin graveyard. Zen wouldn't have been in a hurry before. He would have had enough time to find it. But the ruin graveyard might get attacked soon. He didn't know if the creatures on the graveyard could survive that. A grim air descended over Fuxi and the others. The pear hill had 3 chaos ancient gods and several eternal realm warriors, but even they found it difficult to deal with those heads. The ruin graveyard probably didn't even have any eternal realm warriors. What chance did they have against the attacks? Master Kendrick, please make the pear hill turn around. We'll set off right away, said Zen. Although the pear hill was located inside the primitive land could crack open just enough for it to drive the whole land forward. In addition to the pear hill's power, the primitive land would also help, so its speed shouldn't be slow. Meanwhile, on the northwest side of the chaos, the ruin graveyard, indeed, was currently in grave danger. Hundreds and thousands of heads were already launching attacks. These heads did not have any preferences. They would simply bite off and swallow anything or anyone they caught. The divine land was at the center of the ruin graveyard now, so it was not damaged yet. But the huge tombstones around the ruin graveyard had already been gnawed into pieces. The ruin graveyard occupants estimated that the tombstones were big enough to keep the heads at bay. In the meantime, they racked their minds, trying to think of a way out. However, after the heads devoured tombstones as big as they were, their size started to double. Several heads had become inconceivably huge in the next few days. At the rate they were growing, it wouldn't be long before they could devour the entire ruin graveyard. Chapter 3754, Appearance. There were several figures on the huge tombstones and all of them used the grand teleportation technique all of a sudden. Buzz. A number of space channels appeared and with them came Mike, Holy J, Bromley, Jeremiah and Joy. When they stopped, there was a head biting a tombstone before them. It had just made its way into the ruin graveyard and was twice its original size. I'll go first. Holy J, follow me, ordered Bromley. What about me? Asked Mike. You guard the rear, said Holy J chuckling. Mike sulked, feeling helpless. A holy being's strength was similar to that of a warrior at the 5th or 6th stage of the Other Shore realm. However, with a powerful Other Shore token, the holy being's strength would double. Mike had borne the butterfly as instructed by the owner of the mysterious yellow tower. Shortly after, the mysterious yellow tower had been destroyed and he now wouldn't even have a chance to go change this Other Shore token. What the hell was this? What was going on? Buzz. A huge seal appeared above Bromley's head. It appeared to be carved with the ghost rock on stage 17 of the Other Shore. It was a seal of extraordinary quality and was carved out by none other than the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's 4th disciple, Justin. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In a flash, Bromley appeared near the giant head. These heads would usually attack living creatures. But now, they seemed to gorge themselves on the tombstones, unable to pull themselves away and react to their surroundings. The punishment seal. Crack, 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 crack. The seal continued to cover the head, creating marks all across its surface. Let's make our move, now. Bromley roared once he'd placed the seal. Buzz, Joy, Holy J, Mike and Jeremiah then appeared around the head and attacked the marks at the same time. They didn't exert so much strength, each of them only releasing 1 divine megaton of power. Yet in 3 seconds, they had already attacked the marks dozens of times. Such an amount of power might not cause any damage to the head, but it could trigger the punishment seal. Each time the punishment seal was triggered, a force pierced through the internal space and spread into the target's body. The force was so powerful that it could not be fought against. This was the power of the punishment seal. The head carried nothing and continued munching down on the tombstone. Hundreds of incredible powers began circulating within it and after a slight tremble, countless cracks broke out from the surface and shattered the ground beneath. We killed another one, Joy yelled with a smile. Killing one is no easy task, replied Holy J, his eyes filled with worry. There were too many heads. Usually, if the creatures were large in number, each individual was very weak. But here, each head was extremely powerful. Zeke, the holy being, had accidentally been swallowed by one of the heads and could now do nothing more than restore his body in the divine land. Find another target, said Mike. They were about to use the grand teleportation technique when a massive monster suddenly rushed over from close by. It was a head, 100 times larger than the rest. It moved unimaginably fast, and before they even knew what was going on, a large mouth covered them, attempting to swallow them in a single gulp. Buzz, buzz, buzz. All the holy beings used the grand teleportation technique and disappeared. They appeared in the sky, over 100 miles above, all harboring a lingering fear. If they had reacted too slowly, they would have no doubt all been killed. Where is Jeremiah? Bromley suddenly asked. Holy J scanned their surroundings and revealed in horror, I'm afraid he was devoured. We'll kill it together, Joy yelled, frowning deep in anger. We are no match for a head 100 times stronger than the last one. Let's get out of here, Bromley bellowed, decisively ordering a retreat. Just then, a figure walked out of the space channel. It's Rocher. The sight of Rocher lit them up. The younger generation had now completely surpassed holy beings like them. The strength of Hallett, Augustus and other disciples all surpassed Bromley's. Rocher was the most remarkable of them all, and seemed to be the strongest warrior in the ruin graveyard. He nodded to the holy beings and took out a sword. It was the lone sword. It was only once he had the sword in his possession did Rocher realize how terrifyingly powerful it was. The sword had the endless destructive power, and he had still yet to tap into its full potential. Splash! The destructive power continued flowing around the lone sword, and even Rocher, with a clear mind, was affected by the violence within it. He waved his sword with a glimmer of enjoyment shining through. The power that radiated off tore the incomprehensibly massive head into pieces, snapping it like dry branches. Amazing! A truly astonishing power, praised Joy. Mike stood complacent, his hands tucked behind his back. Rocher was from his evolutionary universe after all. Rocher was a stark contrast, however. He held the lone sword in his hands, an indescribable struggle visible on his face. He was clearly incompatible with the devastating power the sword contained. When he had first noticed the lone sword and set himself on retrieving it, it did not possess such destructive power. Something must have happened to the lone sword before he reached the 33rd floor. Rocher's intuition was sharp, but he had never expected Jeffrey to have tampered with the holy pillar and changed the position of the lone sword. This modification was both a repair and an enhancement. The lone sword was at the 11th stair, second only to the Snake Spirit King's holy items. Even so, Rocher didn't like it. He cupped his hands towards the holy beings and was about to teleport away using the grand teleportation technique. There were over 100 heads in the ruin graveyard that were 100 times larger than ordinary heads. Hallett and Augustus couldn't deal with them and had to rely on Rocher to kill them alone. Just as Rocher was about to leave, a voice suddenly came from the lone sword. You are too slow. They will grow 1,000 times or even 10,000 times larger than they are now, before you can kill them. With the power of this sword, you will not be able to kill them at all. The voice startled Rocher. Who are you? Who is inside my sword? He asked immediately. Bromley, Mike and the others were confused as well when they saw Rocher's reaction. Buzz. Wisps of souls condensed on Rocher's sword, and the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord and his 4 disciples appeared all at once. You are the owner of the mysterious Yellow Tower, said Rocher, utterly surprised. The owner of the mysterious Yellow Tower? Why is he hiding in the lone sword? Not far away, Bromley, Holy J and the others were surprised and pleased by what they heard. If the old man really was the owner of the mysterious Yellow Tower, then he must also be the owner of the ruin graveyard. It's me, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord replied flatly. Sir, do you have a way to save the ruin graveyard? Rocher asked hurriedly. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord looked around the ruin graveyard. The huge heads in the distance were still madly devouring everything they could, growing rapidly. When I designed this area, I knew this day would come. But I only have one chance at this. Chapter 3755, A One-Time Array. There were 6 extremely huge tombstones in the ruin graveyard, but 2 were missing to make room for the exit and entrance. Between the tombstones were several large spaces, and behind them was a dull gray forest, known as the Rotten Tree Forest. The Rotten Tree Forest had been grim and lifeless for many years. The human race were not the only ones who did not like this place, even the native races of the ruin graveyard hated it. Rocher used the grand teleportation technique over and over again to rush towards the forest, several holy beings following closely behind. Although he had carried another shore token from the 33rd floor, his achievements in space were not much better than those of the holy beings, and so they were still able to catch up to him. Buzz. In the sky above the rotten tree forest, Roche and the several holy beings stepped out of the space channel one after another. Roche held the long sword tight and placed it horizontally in front of him. The figure of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord emerged once more. He looked down and said, "Clean up the rotten trees within a radius of 10 miles, with the middle one as the center." The second he finished speaking, Joy smiled and said excitedly, "Let me do it." She fell backwards and flew towards the rotten tree forest. As she landed, a purple mist rose from a large area of the ground. It spread out quickly and formed a massive circle within the forest, enveloping a range of 10 miles in radius, no more, no less. Swish! The surging sword intent then soared into the sky and every rotten tree within the range was pierced through by a purple sword. They then soared into the sky and went straight to Joy, finally gathering in her body. The spreading purple mist then thinned out and all the rotten trees had disappeared. The center of forest had been turned into a circular plain. "That's quite a unique technique," remarked the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord as he looked at Joy. Joy smiled and had butterflies fluttering in her stomach. Being praised by the owner of the mysterious yellow tower was a great compliment to her grand purple aura technique. The soul of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord then jumped down and stood in the plane that had been created. He stamped his feet lightly and a golden light began expanding around him. A stone array appeared on the ground. "This array exists under the rotten tree forest," Bromley exclaimed, totally surprised. He had been in the ruin graveyard a long time but he never knew there was an array hidden here. He wasn't the only one, the native races did not know either. "Yes, it was prepared for a day such as this," revealed the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. He then began controlling the array. When the array was activated, the entire rotten tree forest shook, and the bitten tombstones began glowing. Once the array was fully activated, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord patted its center and roared, "Open!" Rumble, 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 the rotten tree forest shook more violently. Splash! A huge dragon-shaped mark suddenly lit up within the forest. A light dragon then soared upwards into the sky and then towards the heads on the tombstones. Splash! 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 Massive dragon-shaped marks appeared one after another, shooting the light dragons straight up. A few seconds later and tens of thousands of light dragons had rushed out. Roche, Bromley, Mike, Holy J, and Joy were all stunned by this terrifying energy they were witnessing. A single light dragon wasn't a big deal, Roche's sword strike could surpass it quite easily. But in just a few seconds, there were tens of thousands of light dragons, and their number continued increasing. By the end, there might be millions or even tens of millions of them. No matter how powerful the warriors were, they would find it difficult to stand up to such an overwhelming amount. What happened to the rotten tree forest? What a terrifying energy reaction. Is that the secret weapon of our ruin graveyard? The creatures in other parts of the ruin graveyard were witnessing this too. The invasion of the heads had made the human race and other races desperate. They had never imagined the ruin graveyard held a secret weapon like this, and it filled them all with great excitement. The light dragons seemed to have a mind of their own as they rushed towards the heads on the tombstones. All the heads, those at their original sizes and those 100 or 1,000 times larger, were devoured by the light dragons in a flash. Huge balls of light then burst out, one after the other. They shone like suns and erupted one at a time, sending a blinding light enveloping the entire ruin graveyard. This lasted for 5 minutes. Finally, the light dimmed and the dragons and heads on the tombstones disappeared. "We made it," Holy J yelled in happiness. "It turns out the ruin graveyard is really powerful." Mike couldn't contain his elation. "Sir, how many times can this array be used?" Roche asked enthusiastically. Bromley, Joy and the others were curious about this as well. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord slowly raised his hand and said, "Once. The energy in the array has now been used up." What? This rendered the holy beings silent and left them somewhat disheartened. "But with your great theurgy, you will eventually lead us through this calamity," said Roche matter-of-factly. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord was the owner of the mysterious Yellow Tower. Mike, Bromley and the others hoped he could reopen the mysterious Yellow Tower, but they didn't get the chance to ask their questions just yet. However, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord sighed and revealed, "The original plan was I would stand in the ruin graveyard and lead you through this disaster. However, things have changed." "What do you mean?" Roche asked. "Forget it. The change that the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord referred to was the fact that Zen had successfully opened up his primitive land, which meant the ruin graveyard, which was used as a backup, was no longer needed. If it weren't for Zen's success, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord would have bet everything on the ruin graveyard. But he did not want to tell them this, it would be a huge blow to their confidence. He considered for a moment and then said, "The change in the plan was caused by a sudden attack on the mysterious yellow tower, which has now been completely destroyed. My 4 disciples and I have all died, but I had a premonition and placed wisps of our souls into the lone sword so that part of us is still alive." What? The mysterious yellow tower was destroyed and the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord was dead. Roche and the holy beings were stunned. The powerhouse who had built the ruined graveyard and the mysterious yellow tower had died. How terrifying was the opponent he had faced? "If that's the case, how do we fight against these heads?" Bromley said gravely. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had used the array to clean up all the heads here, but there were still more in the chaos. "You can't deal with them," answered the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. "Then all hope is lost," Mike murmured. The news that the mysterious yellow tower had been destroyed devastated him. He had been looking forward to obtaining a better other shore token. Now, however, he lost all hope. What was worse, from what the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had said, he couldn't even stay in the ruined graveyard. "No, there's still hope," the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord said with a smile. "You are the hope." Chapter 3756, A Giant Clam. Mike shook his head, confused by the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's words. "Sir, what hope? What do you mean?" Bromley was the first to react. "Is it because of the butterfly Mike carried?" The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord nodded in response. "That butterfly, does it have any secret?" Mike asked. "If he comes, I believe he will save the whole ruined graveyard," the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord answered with a smile. In fact, he no longer attached much importance to the ruined graveyard. He now placed all his hopes on Zen, so this place became dispensable to him. He and his disciples left their souls because they wondered how things could develop. Even if Zen did not arrive, it wouldn't have mattered. Nonetheless, he was convinced that Zen would come. After all, both the Divine Land and his parents were here. Who is it that you refer to?" Mike asked frantically. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord grinned and his body began to fluctuate. While he returned to Roche's lone sword, he spoke calmly, "Hold on. He should be coming any moment now." Then, he disappeared and everyone grew silent. They could not believe someone was going to save them. In terms of strength, Roche reached the 33rd floor of the mysterious yellow tower and was already a master in the 33rd stage of the other shore realm. With this, he was well recognized as a top master in the chaos. If anything, Zen might not even stand a chance against him. Was the man who the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord mentioned even more powerful than Roche? Though no one said it aloud, everyone doubted what he had said. He did not make a promise or reassure them. His words sounded more like encouragement so they could push through future difficulties. "No matter what, the ruined graveyard is the last place we will live in. Let's hold on until reinforcements arrive," Bromley reassured. Outside the ruined graveyard, all the heads, big and small, were cleared up. However, a large number of heads still arrived from afar. After what happened in the rotten tree forest, all the races from the ruined graveyard sent their clansmen and warriors to inquire. With full transparency, Bromley explained everything they knew and what the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had said. People had very mixed reactions. When the heads initially attacked, the native races of the ruined graveyard did not fight to the fullest of their abilities. They had doubts about each other and suspected the humans. Moreover, they made intricate escape plans if it was necessary. Once the ruined graveyard was completely destroyed, they would gather the remaining members to escape. They figured that though the heads covered almost everywhere, they might only be distributed across the ruined graveyard. As they had anticipated this to unfold, the races preserved their strength for the escape rather than the attacks. However, they grew excited as they caught sight of the light dragons in the rotten tree forest. As expected, the ruined graveyard was protected by a powerhouse. On top of that, Bromley's words excited them even more. They began to give an all-out fight. Just like that, all the powerful warriors of the human race and the other races had gone out. If the heads even came close, they would be instantly killed to prevent them from devouring and growing stronger. In the first 3 days, almost no head survived in the ruined graveyard under the joint efforts of many races. But on the 4th day, the dynamic changed. The number of heads had increased, and they were 10 to 20 times larger than the previous heads that attacked the ruined graveyard. Although all the races did their best to fight the heads off, some managed to escape and devoured many creatures almost instantly. Once these heads entered the ruined graveyard, they grew rapidly as they devoured. This made them more threatening opponents. By the 5th day, hundreds of heads that grew 100 times larger, and 2 that grew 1,000 times larger appeared in the ruined graveyard. The other shore realm masters of the various races died, and many holy beings of the divine land were injured and killed as well. If the two heads which were 1,000 times larger continued to devour, they would grow to a size bigger than the ruined graveyard. Even Rocher felt powerless as he faced the gigantic heads. With the help of dozens of warriors at the high stages of the other shore realm, he launched an attack on one of the gigantic heads but failed. Though they managed to injure the head, almost half of the warriors in this attempt died. Once again, the ruined graveyard was in grave danger. Floating in the air, Rocher looked at the heads from a distance. He held the lone sword horizontally before him and asked, "Sir, is there really no other way to save the ruined graveyard?" The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord remained silent. The answer was obvious. At this point, the ruined graveyard was a cub pushed into an arena. Even if Rocher became the sharpest claw of the cub, they would still have no hope to win the battle. There was no other choice but to hold on. 6 hours later, the other huge head grew to 10,000 times larger than the ordinary ones. It was easily seen throughout the ruined graveyard. The women and children who hid in the depths of the ruined graveyard looked up at the large creature and were flushed with panic. All of a sudden, the divine land docking within the ruined graveyard began to move. When Zen left, the divine land was left in the control of the reincarnated Harper. He paid close attention to the disaster in the ruined graveyard. When he saw that it was about to be devoured, he moved to help out. Once the ruined graveyard broke open, he would control the divine land to rush out as soon as possible. Another 2 hours passed, and a massive tombstone was devoured. This head grew by 20,000 times. At the sight of this, every living being sank into a sense of hopelessness. "Sir, if I burn the lone sword, can I kill that head?" Rocher asked with a tinge of hope left. If the other shore tokens were burned, great powers would be unleashed. On top of that, the power of the lone sword could be more unimaginable if it were burned. However, it would lead to the punishment of truth. Even the memory flame could not save him from this, which meant he wouldn't have the possibility of rebirth, either. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord remained silent. If they ever burned the other shore token, it would only mean that the ruined graveyard was completely hopeless. Rocher thought he couldn't give up so easily. Even if he had to sacrifice himself, he wouldn't think twice. He reached out his hand and gently stroked the sword. His eyes widened, but just as he was about to make a move, Bromley's voice echoed from not too far away. "Something is coming." Rocher turned his head to see, but merely gazed into a blank distance. However, after a few moments, a bean-sized thing could be seen moving from the depths of the chaos. "Oh, look how fast it is." Mike squirmed in delight. The bean-sized thing grew larger as it moved closer. Slowly, it was close enough to be recognized. It was a giant clam with a big mouth. "Is that the hope?" Mike asked in a disappointed tone. Joy shrugged her shoulders. "It looks more like a joke." As they looked at it, they saw that the clam with large teeth and an odd shape was not there to save them at all. Chapter 3757, Figure as Tiny as Dust. A great distance stood between them and the giant clam, making it difficult for them to tell its actual size. However, as the giant clam approached them, it began to grow bigger and bigger. The astonishment in the eyes of the holy beings, and the warriors at the other shore realm intensified. The divine land was massive enough. The ruined graveyard was already several times larger than the divine land, but this giant clam was several times larger than the ruined graveyard. The giant clam headed straight for the ruined graveyard without pausing or changing direction. Everyone looked at the heads, which were growing like crazy, and then back at the giant clam, which was approaching them at a rapid pace. Their hearts began to sink. The ruined graveyard would be doomed. When the huge clam was just hundreds of thousands of miles away from the ruined graveyard, its serrated crack had already opened. Then, it slowed down. It did in the same way a giant would slow down to crouch down and feed itself food. "Let's stop fighting. It's useless to struggle," Holy J said helplessly. Even if they killed the heads, they still wouldn't be able to save the ruined graveyard. They were destined to be swallowed by the huge clam, and by the size of the clam's mouth, it could surely do it in one gulp. No matter how hard they tried, they would die eventually. Even Rocher, who had been bravely fighting day and night without taking any breaks, drew back his lone sword. After distancing himself from the heads, he stood looking up at the sky. Despite the situation, he almost looked calm, but none of them could tell how he was actually feeling. Above the divine land stood another group of people who were watching them. Most of them were consummate true gods. One of them was Rochelle, who had previously died but was revived because of Nellie's pleading. She had become a consummate true god again and had been wholeheartedly comprehending the truth of godly way. With her talent, it wouldn't be long before she mastered the truth of godly way, allowing her to ring the bell and reach the other shore realm. However, before she could finish cultivating the truth of godly way, bad news struck. The bell had been broken. When Rochelle learned this, she fell into a depression. She didn't expect to meet such a great disappointment. Now, the ruined graveyard was about to get destroyed, and there was nothing she could do to escape the divine land. She hit a dead end, and she didn't know how to get out of it. Not far in front of Rochelle, there was a warrior in the 6th stage of the other shore realm standing with his hands behind his back. This was Mike's disciple, Harold. Like Rochelle, Harold had been waiting to enter the 7th stage of the other shore realm for a long time. To prepare, he had put himself into seclusion. When he received the news, he became as depressed as Rochelle. He was already about to ring the bell after breaking through, only to find out that the bell was broken. Because he was so busy mourning over this, he didn't even expect that in just a few days, he would find something new to mourn over, the ruined graveyard's doom. To them, it seemed that no one could escape the tragedy that was about to come. Swoosh, boom, crack, 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 as the heads continued to bite, a tombstone, which was even larger than the divine land, cracked. When it collapsed, it made an earth-shattering sound and buried countless creatures under it. However, the powerful warriors in the ruined graveyard didn't care about such a noise. They didn't even bother to look at it. The giant clam was already very close to them now, its mouth hung open. After a few more seconds, it reached the ruined graveyard, swallowing it whole. Such long, big teeth, Augustus said, his eyes wide open in a mixture of fear and amazement. They seem to be some kind of plant, Hallett said with a frown. It's a wonder of nature. It really is amazing, Augustus said, trailing off. Well, when these sharp teeth close and grind you into tiny pieces, you won't be able to call it amazing anymore, Hallett said in annoyance. If the giant clam closed its mouth, it would be able to grind the entire ruined graveyard, the tombstones, the divine land, and even the heads into fine-grained powders. Almost everyone's heart was clenched. Augustus began talking again, unbothered. Well, it hasn't closed its mouth yet. Is it going to stop? Hallett refused to reply, not wanting to speak to him anymore. Augustus had always been so optimistic, but this time, his optimism was out of place. The ruined graveyard was already heading deep into the giant clam. Oddly enough, its teeth still hadn't chomped them to death. Why wasn't the giant clam closing its mouth? This was the question they all asked themselves. Was the giant clam planning on using a different method to destroy the ruined graveyard? Or will it let go of the ruined graveyard? A hint of hope, although unrealistic, began to form in their hearts. After a while, the ruined graveyard passed the giant clam's teeth, but for some reason, it still hadn't attacked. Not long after this, they saw a mountain floating in the distance, and it was unimaginably huge. Why is there a huge mountain flying over there? I thought the tombstones in the ruined graveyard were large, but they're nothing compared to that. What mountain is that? The people in the ruined graveyard looked up at the big, flying landform. At first, when they saw the mountain, they felt a sense of awe, but after staring at it for a few more minutes, they began to feel suffocated. After a while, Lorena and Rosie appeared at the top of the divine land. Harold greeted and bowed to Lorena. Lorena waved her hand and took 2 steps forward, her eyes in thought yet clouded with confusion. It seems to be the Pear Hill. The Pear Hill. Lorena, are you sure? Rosie said with a look of disbelief. The last time she heard about it, she was still so young. Although she knew what it was, she had never been there before. Lorena, on the other hand, had been to Pearl Hill before, even being able to climb it. When she had reached the mountain's peak, she looked down, trying to take in the whole of what she was standing on. However, the mountain was as big as a province. Even if someone stood on top of it, it would still be difficult for them to see the entire mountain. Moreover, the chaos ancient gods had transformed the mountain, and its appearance had changed drastically. For a moment, Lorena was unsure. Lorena, you're right, that is the Pear Hill. Harper's voice came from the divine land. Harper, who was inside the sun, could see the mountain more clearly. But isn't the Pear Hill in the source world? Why is it in the stomach of this giant clam? Lorena asked curiously. I don't know. Maybe a major change has happened in the source world, Harper deduced. A major change in the source world. When Lorena thought about this, her heart began to weigh down her body. Zen, Yan, and Jeffrey were still in the source world. She didn't know what was happening to them or how they were doing in the source world. To say she wasn't worried about them would be a lie. As everyone was staring at the mountain, a head, which was 20,000 times its original size, devoured a tombstone. When it did this, much to their dismay, it grew even larger. Now, it was about 50,000 times its original size. To their surprise, the gigantic head then gave up on the other tombstones and headed straight for the divine land. Harper was on guard against the giant head, but when he shifted his attention to the pear hill, he forgot about it. Seeing the head inching closer, he uttered a final goodbye in his heart. He wanted to control the divine land to escape, but sadly, it was too late. The head had already reached the rear of the divine land. Those who were outside the divine land could only stare as the gigantic head began to open its mouth. They wore the saddest expressions on their faces. The people inside the divine land were completely unaware of the impending crisis. They continued to live their lives and followed their routines. The end of the divine land, Rocher said in a detached manner. After all, it wouldn't be long before everyone else died. The end result would still be the same, even if anyone died a little earlier or a little later. He was no longer desperate but instead, rather calm after accepting his fate. No, it's not. From the lone sword, the voice of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord rang out again. When Rocher heard this voice, he didn't feel anything anymore. No matter how powerful this old man had been, everything was already history. A remnant soul wouldn't be able to save anyone, he thought. He felt that he had read the mind of the owner of the mysterious yellow tower. But he still asked indifferently, "Why do you say that?" "Because that is the hope," said the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. As soon as the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord finished speaking, Rocher saw a small, blurry figure appear on the top of the huge head. Compared to the head, the figure was but a speck of dust, but because of Rocher's astonishing eyesight, he managed to see it. Chapter 3758, True Appearance. Bromley, Mike, and those who were standing at the top of the divine land like Lorena and Harold, also saw the blurry figure in the distance. Who is that man? Is he from our ruined graveyard? What does he want to do? Does he plan on facing that head alone? It's impossible. In the eyes of these people, Rocher's power was the strongest in the chaos. After all, there was no other sure token that was stronger than one from the 33rd stage. Lorena, Harper, and all the others recognized this as fact. And yet, even Rocher was unable to deal with the head, which had become 50,000 times larger. Who else could possibly face it? However, there were powers other than those of other sure tokens in the chaos. Take for example, the power that Zen was using was the omniscient power that every Soul Sea Realm warrior had. The catch was, he could only use this power in his inner world. The head either didn't notice or completely ignored Zen's small figure rushing towards it. Instead, it opened its large mouth to take a bite of the divine land. One bite was enough to swallow a third of the divine land. However, just then, the head abruptly stopped in its tracks. There seemed to be an invisible force between its upper and lower jaws, preventing it from closing its mouth. It suddenly couldn't bite anymore. "Give me some strength," said Zen. "No problem," the ancestry-level bloodline responded. The blood mist in the sky flickered, as if blood-red lightning flashed within it. Zen stretched out a hand and grabbed at the air. Then, he flew up and arched through the air. "Up!" he roared. Swoosh! To everyone's shock, the head was inching upwards, as though it was being dragged into the sky slowly. Rocher, Bromley, Mike, Lorena, Harold and Rochelle were all stunned to see this. That blurry figure might have had the courage to appear above the head, but never in their wildest dreams did they imagine that he would do such a thing. Yet, here was this mysterious figure, lifting the head up into the sky. Then, with incredible force, the blurry figure threw the head into oblivion. What did that mean? The head was roughly the same size as the divine land. Could this mean that this mysterious figure could lift even the divine land? Is there such a powerhouse in the source world? Harold turned to ask Lorena. Previously, he had learned from Lorena that warriors at the 8th stage of the other shore realm were extraordinary, and they would be treated well in the great forces. This knowledge had comforted Harold before. But now, as he watched these events unfold before him, his mind was melting. This figure must have been beyond the other shore realm. No, no one could do that, Lorena answered affirmatively. The corners of Harold's eyes twitched. Where did this figure come from? He wondered. Meanwhile, inside the sun and the divine land, Harper's body trembled as he could barely contain his excitement. Others couldn't see who the person was because he was too far away, but Harper could see him clearly from the divine land's perspective. It was Zen, it had to be. Although the appearance matched, Harper was still not sure. Back then, Zen had asked him about the truth of eternal sword intent. He was only a consummate true god, who hadn't even stepped onto the other shore. But now, he had come so far. Harper came from the source world, and he was naturally insightful. As an other shore realm warrior, he had witnessed the strength of the eternal realm warriors, but which of them had strength like this? Whoosh! A blood-red light shot out from the sky formed by the blood mist. Zen was enveloped in the blood-red light, rendering him a figure of blood. Buzz! Covered in blood, Zen extended the blood sword in his hand and rushed towards the head that he had just thrown. His blood-colored body flashed through the skies as if he had completely ignored all space laws. As he approached, the blood sword flashed ominously. Normally, the blood sword could only cause a wound 4 or 5 inches deep. For the head that had become 50,000 times larger, the damage would have been ignorable. No one else could see clearly what was going on. Even Harper could only see a trace of blood-red light drilling into the head. Then, he heard a slight sound coming from the head. The sound was like a charcoal pencil scratching paper, or like a cool wind whistling through a bamboo forest. After a short while, the head began to disintegrate. It dissolved into hundreds of millions of shards, like a massive meteor shower, raining towards the ground. After all the pieces disappeared, a silence fell over the ruined graveyard. Everyone was speechless. Even now, the creatures in the ruined graveyard had no idea what had really happened. The only thing that gave them some semblance of solace was that a human being had killed the massive head. After cutting off the head, Zen scanned his surroundings till his eyes fell on Lorena, who was standing at the top of the divine land. In a flash of blood-red light, Zen suddenly appeared in front of Lorena. When Lorena, Rosie and Harold saw the figure of blood, they froze in shock. Harold, however, stepped in front of Lorena to protect her, even though he knew that this was meaningless. Staring at the figure of blood before her, Lorena suddenly had a sense of familiarity. She could not help but call out, "Zen, is that you?" Rosie shot a concerned glance at her sister, feeling a little uneasy. Was she so stressed that she had begun to hallucinate? What if she annoyed the figure of blood? "Zen," Harold called cautiously. The blood-red light on Zen's body began to fade, revealing his true appearance. This was his incarnation, so he didn't have any special power. He was like a grass or a stone in the primitive land. He was insignificant. Rosie turned around and glared at Harold this time. What was wrong with him? But then, she suddenly sensed that something was wrong. As she turned to the figure before them, her body froze. Standing nearby, Rochelle also felt as if she had been struck by lightning. When she was reborn, she had grown up to perform excellently. But deep in her heart, she never stopped thinking about Zen. She knew that her sister went to Zen to beg him to spare her, and that Zen had gone to the distant source world in order to grow stronger. All this time, she was hoping that if Zen returned one day, she would have surpassed him in power. Of course, she had never told anyone about this. When all the resources of the ruined graveyard were available and the strength of the consummate true gods in the divine land had advanced by leaps and bounds, she felt hopeful. Even Rocher had managed to reach the 33rd stage, and he was said to be the strongest warrior in the source world. This whole time, she believed that as long as she mastered the truth of godly way, it was possible for her to catch up with Zen. But now that she looked at Zen, she suddenly felt small and stupid. Her imagined opponent was far beyond her reach. Chapter 3759, Master and Disciple. Mike, Rocher, and Bromley were on the tombstone at the periphery of the ruined graveyard. They couldn't clearly see what was happening at the top of the divine land. But they did see the head, which was 50,000 times its original size, thrown into the air and shattered into pieces. Bromley was stunned for a while. He could manage to mutter only 2 words. A miracle. Irrespective of whether or not it's a miracle, at least the divine land is safe now, Holy J said with a smile. That blood man is standing at the top of the divine land. Let's go and have a look, Mike said, a space fluctuation rippling on the surface of his body. He got into the space channel and flew towards the divine land. There are still heads that haven't been dealt with, Rocher said. He had hardly finished talking before he realized that the holy beings had already left. Rocher also wanted to go to the top of the divine land to see who that person was and how he could possess such an incredible theurgy. But the thought of the heads and how they had no one to take care of them made him suppress his curiosity and rush towards the nearest head, which had expanded to 10,000 times its original size. Lone sword. The moment Rocher took out this other shore token, a blood-red figure appeared on the head. This figure held a blood sword and then stabbed into the head, causing it to shatter into pieces before Rocher. The figure then dispersed quickly. But before it dissipated, it turned to look at Rocher. Rocher was stunned. Although this man was wrapped in a thick layer of dark red blood so that Rocher couldn't see his real appearance, Rocher felt that the outline of this face was somewhat familiar. It was precisely the shape of Zen's face. The bloody man disappeared from before Rocher. I must be thinking too much. How could it be Zen? Rocher muttered, shaking his head. His gaze then locked onto the next head. This head was now 800 times its original size. The bloody man appeared on this head as well. Has he teleported to reach this head? Or, it is an avatar. Rocher observed more heads and found a blood-red figure on each of them. There were over 10,000 heads of different sizes in the ruin graveyard, and over 10,000 blood-red figures attacked these heads at the same time. They managed to kill all these heads in a while. With so many powerful avatars, it looks like I don't need to make a move. Saying thus, Rocher flew towards the top of the Divine Land, smiling bitterly. At the top of the Divine Land, Lorena held Zen tightly in her arms, sobbing. Rosie walked around Zen. She looked her nephew up and down, comparing him with the Zen in her impression. However, other than his appearance, Zen's aura was completely different from before. The last time she saw him, Zen had already mastered 2 truths of godly ways. These truths of godly ways affected Zen's temperament, and he had an edge while being forthright at that time. Now it seemed that Zen was no longer what he used to be. If this guy hadn't just thrown the head that had expanded to 50,000 times its original size into the sky, Rosie would have thought that he was at the same level as them. Mother, I haven't finished the mission my grandfather gave me. The situation in the source world is very complicated and is no longer what it used to be. I didn't even kill our enemies myself. Yellow Thirk and Divine Farmer are dead, but someone else killed them. But I have found the remaining members of the 9 Li race. They are all in the Pear Hill, Zen said to Lorena. Lorena's eyes welled up as she looked at Zen, but she was happy as she said, "You've done a good job." "Where is Yan? Is she all right?" "She's fine. She's now in the Pear Hill," said Zen. "Where is Jeffrey?" Lorena asked. Zen hesitated before continuing, "He's fine as well." Whatever he knew about Jeffrey, he had obtained from the disciple of the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, Dale. It was difficult for Zen to describe the state of the abstruse energy world to Lorena. But Lorena couldn't remain calm anymore. What happened to Jeffrey? Is he really all right? It's a long story. He's not in the chaos, Zen said vaguely, having no choice but to extend some form of explanation to her. Long story? What are you talking about? He is Lorena's grandson. Explain more clearly, Rosie chimed in. Zen felt a headache coming on. At this moment, there was another space fluctuation beside him. Bromley, Mike, Holy J, Joy, and the other holy beings walked out of the space channel. They froze as their eyes focused on Zen, their hearts beating faster as they took in Zen's appearance, unable to believe what they were seeing. It was so absurd when the most impossible thing they thought really happened. Did you just throw the head 50,000 times its original size to the sky? Mike asked Zen. Yes, I did, Zen said, nodding. How did you do it? Mike asked again, astonished. All he wanted to know was the answer to this question, all other thoughts fleeing his mind. Bromley, Holy J, and Joy probably had the same thought as they stared at Zen with eager eyes. Because this is my inner world, Zen replied. I can do it with the omniscient power. Your inner world, Mike said wonderingly. The holy beings seemed suddenly enlightened, and Bromley said, is it because of the grand weapon refining method and the primal chaos technique that you were able to achieve this? Back then, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord had given these to Bromley, who had then passed them down to Zen. At the time, Bromley had known that the inner world cultivated with this method would be completely different from ordinary inner worlds. But he hadn't expected Zen's inner world to become so huge. When Zen spotted Bromley, he took a few steps towards him and knelt before him. Master, greetings. Zen had seen Bromley when he'd been in the fairy palace, but that had only been an illusion that Bromley had left behind. This was the first time that Zen had met his master. Please stand up. Bromley tried to help Zen up. I accepted you as my disciple because your father asked me to. But actually, I never personally instructed you. Now that you have achieved such an unfathomable level of cultivation, being your master is more than what I deserve. You will always be my master, no matter how strong or weak I am. Besides, going by what you said, Hallett and Gus can no longer be your disciples, either. Zen knelt back on the ground, refusing to stand up. Hallett and Augustus had already surpassed Bromley in strength, but they still recognized Bromley as their master. Bromley, that's true, you still recognize Hallett and Augustus as your disciples. Why should Zen be any different? Mike said from beside him. Bromley nodded as he said, I was wrong. Having Zen as my disciple is probably the best thing I've done in my life." As he spoke, he helped Zen to his feet. Roche, Hallett, and Augustus emerged from the space channel, one after the other. At the sight of Zen, they all looked as if they had seen a ghost. Augustus's eyes, in particular, were wide as saucers. Chapter 3760, The Vibration of the Sword. "Hallett, Gus." Zen yelled when he saw them, bowing to both. Hallett responded immediately, "Zen, how have you been?" Zen and Augustus had had a very close relationship before. He leaned forward, took a good look at him, and stretched his head out to smell his scent. "Zen, which stage of the other shore realm have you reached by now?" he asked. Zen said, "Which stage of the other shore realm I'm at?" Zen had no idea how to answer this question. He'd been in stage 33 of the other shore, but he hadn't fused with another shore token in that stage. The levels of the other shore tokens he had with him weren't very high. It might not be accurate to say that he was at the 33rd stage of the other shore realm, but it was a fact that he was at the eternal realm. "I'm at the 20th stage of the other shore realm," Augustus said. "Since the mysterious yellow tower was destroyed, I haven't obtained the other shore token yet, but much to my luck, I've fused with a holy armor from the 19th floor," he continued, seemingly proud of himself. He showed them the other shore token as proof. It appeared on him, causing a blue light to radiate from his body. The aura released by the holy armor was quite captivating. It looked as if it held a strong, mysterious power. "It's another shore token of the mysterious type, isn't it?" Zen said, studying the token with his eyes. "Yes," Augustus said confidently. It was obvious he was very proud of his possession. "Do you want to have a try? But you better watch yourself. Even if you have infinite power, you won't be able to defeat me." Augustus jested. "Augustus, Zen's just returned. Give him a break," Bromley said, embarrassed at the behavior of his disciple. He always knew Augustus had something special in him, but sometimes, he did act like a complete idiot. Hallett also looked at Augustus with a disapproving gaze. "He's too haughty for his own good," he thought to himself. Augustus, however, paid no attention to their reminders and stares. He had been waiting to battle Zen once he returned for too long. Zen had the extremely formidable power, but Augustus wasn't ready to give up his challenge just yet. "Augustus, if you so badly want to battle with me, then let your request be my command," Zen said, smiling smugly. "Zen, the armor Augustus is wearing is extremely powerful. Even Roche wouldn't be able to break from it if he were trapped by it. No matter how powerful you are, you won't be able to do anything to free yourself from its hold," Hallett reminded, worried. Even though he knew Augustus was definitely no match for Zen, he still didn't want Zen to take any chances. However, before Zen could respond, Augustus charged at him. "Zen, be careful," Hallett yelled through the noise. Streaks of blue light outlined the holy armor, making Augustus appear like a fast, radiating figure. As he waved his hands in the air, two semicircular blue spaces shot from his palms, attacking Zen. The other shore tokens in the mysterious yellow tower were carefully chosen by the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. Almost every floor had a unique other shore token. The holy armor was one of them. If one were trapped in the armor's blue spaces, they wouldn't be able to escape, falling into a constant cycle. No one was able to free themselves from it, not even Roche. Little did Augustus know that Zen could use the power of the ancestry-level bloodline at will. As soon as Augustus' spaces came charging at him, Zen had already analyzed the type of the space power and figured out a way to deal with it. Bang! The two semicircular spaces gathered together, locking Zen between them. "What will our precious little Zen do to get out of this trap?" Augustus said mockingly and laughed proudly. Zen stretched out his finger, and from it came a transparent spiral of power. With a quick move, he swept the spaces, completely slicing them with just the tip of his finger. He tore the holy armor's mysterious, blue spaces so easily as if he had simply torn a piece of paper. Augustus looked at him, his mouth hanging wide open. With the amount of power Zen held, Augustus knew Zen would be able to deal with the holy armor accordingly, but he didn't expect it to be that easy for him. He was standing face to face with someone who was able to break not only the holy armor of the 19th stage of the other shore, but also the Thurges of the Chaos Ancient Gods and the Grand Master of Heaven. Roche, who was standing a few meters away, walked up to Zen, cupped his hands together, and with equal excitement said, "Zen." "Roche." Zen cheered out. The two of them shared a profound look. There was a special and unbreakable bond between them. They were both talents from the evolutionary universe. They experienced the lows and highs of life together. They'd basically known each other for most of their lives. Their friendship was very precious to them. It wasn't something one could easily encapsulate in words. When Rocher obtained the lone sword, Lorena decided he must be one of the supreme masters of the chaos, making him no less powerful than the Lord of Weapons. Of course, Rocher was overjoyed, but he was also thinking about Zen. What if he was compared with Zen? If they were to be honest, even Bromley and Mike didn't have much confidence in Zen. After all, it was difficult to reach stage 33 of the other shore. Out of all of them, Rocher should have been the first person to reach this stage after the era of wild gods. Who would have thought Zen would be able to bring a world back? Zen, how did you find the ruin graveyard? Rocher asked. Everyone, including Bromley, Mike and Lorena, listened. Wait, you don't know? Zen asked, furrowing his eyebrows in confusion. I asked someone to bring a small butterfly into the mysterious yellow tower. It should be carried by someone from the ruin graveyard. I could find you when I sensed the butterfly's location, but it seems like you don't know that at all. When Bromley, Holy J, Rocher, and the others heard this, they immediately turned their heads towards Mike. Mike's eyes lit up. The butterfly was guiding you. At this moment, the lone sword behind Rocher began to buzz. After a few seconds, the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, Dale, Derek, Arthur, and Justin began to appear one by one. Master Dale. When Zen saw Dale, he smiled. He then turned to look at the old man beside him and recognized him immediately. My name is Zen. Greetings, Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. Ahem. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord coughed and explained, your father, Mike, carries the small butterfly. I have told him before. Mike rolled his eyes. The Grand Supreme Elderly Lord was a man of few words and never told Mike that the butterfly would be so useful in leading his son back. So I'm guessing you two know each other? Rocher asked, hints of amusement and surprise present in his voice. Zen smiled faintly. Actually, this is the first time I've met the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. Although, I must say I'm sure that everything that's happened to me since I was in the evolutionary universe has something to do with him. Why do you say that? Bromley asked in confusion. Although the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord was the owner of the ruined graveyard and the mysterious Yellow Tower, no one knew if he had anything to do with the Divine Land. The grand weapon refining method you gave me was not obtained by you accidentally but a special gift from the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord, Zen said with a smile. Bromley raised his eyebrows, silently doubting what he just heard. It involves the entire chaos or maybe even a larger world. It's too complicated, Zen said. At this moment, Rocher felt a slight vibration from the lone sword. The vibration was subtle, but it had a certain rhythm. Rocher didn't know the reason for it, but the Grand Supreme Elderly answered his silent question for him. It's the other end of the lone sword. Zen, that should be your son, Jeffrey. Jeffrey. Is it Jeffrey on the other side of the lone sword? Where is he? Not far away. Lorena and Rosie, who were listening to their conversation, felt excited at the mention of Jeffrey.